Hey there, I am Austin. In today's video, we will tackle stories where crocodiles ate innocent people, from a man who had done the same thing dozens of times before, finally ran out of luck, to a competitive swimmer whose abilities couldn't save herself from a crocodile. It was May 14th, 2016. The disc golf course at Heron Pond in Pinellas Park, Florida, had been closed since sunset. The water sat flat and black, its surface broken only occasionally by the slow rings of a feeding fish. The bottom dropped sharply beyond the first few feet of shore, descending into channels 12 to 18 feet down. Beneath the surface, visibility was zero. Dennis Carver was 51 years old with no fixed address in Pinellas County and no steady employment. What he had was a routine: wading into Heron Pond during off hours to retrieve disc golf discs lost by players during the day, and reselling them near the course entrance for $5 to $8 each. On a productive night, he could pull 24 discs from the shallows. It was not a living, but it covered the small debts that kept his arrangements with acquaintances from collapsing entirely. He had no vehicle, no consistent income outside the pond. He had been doing it long enough to know which sections held the most discs, which parts of the bank gave quiet entry, and what time of morning left him the longest window before the park filled. He had seen the warning signs posted at multiple points along the shoreline. He had been confronted by a parks employee months earlier after being found near the water after hours, and told plainly not to return. Neither warning had changed his behavior. He had done this many times without incident, and the repetition of safety had become, over time, a kind of evidence, not proof that the pond was without risk, but proof that he had been in it and come out fine. But at 4 o'clock in the morning, with the pond quiet and the discs waiting on the bottom, the distinction was easy to set aside. He had the same information he always had. It had always been enough. He had no reason to expect that tonight would be different from any other night he had stood at that bank. Heron Pond, like many freshwater bodies in central Florida, supported a stable population of American alligators. Adult males in the region commonly reach 11 to 13 feet and weigh between 400 and 500 pounds. They are ambush predators, built to hold position in shallow water near the shoreline, motionless for extended periods, until prey enters their range. The attack carries no visible warning, no surface movement, no sound, no approach that registers before contact. The jaws close in fractions of a second with a bite force exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. When prey cannot be swallowed whole, the animal executes a death roll, rotating rapidly along its longitudinal axis while maintaining its grip, generating torque sufficient to cause catastrophic tissue damage and severe blood loss within seconds. The animal does not release. It is not a behavior that can be interrupted by struggling or noise or pain. The grip is held until the animal chooses to release, and that choice is made on the animal's terms. In late spring, as water temperatures rise and mating season peaks, territorial aggression intensifies significantly. Males that have held the same shoreline for years become more likely to treat anything that enters the water as a threat and to move on it more aggressively than they would at other times of year. They hold shallower positions at night. They close on disturbances more readily. A person wading chest deep in an unfamiliar section of a central Florida pond at 4 a.m. in May is not simply in a body of water that contains alligators. They are in a body of water that is operating at peak predatory conditions, in the dark, alone. He entered the water sometime before 4 a.m. from the low section of bank where the vegetation had thinned. He moved slowly through the shallows, sweeping his arms in wide arcs beneath the surface, searching by feel for the hard plastic edges of submerged discs. The water was dark enough that he could not see his hands. He found discs and threw them toward the bank. He pressed further out. The search drew him into chest-deep water, into sections of the pond he had not worked before, where the bottom was uneven and dropped away unexpectedly underfoot, and the distance back to shore was longer than he was used to. He was focused entirely on the task. The pond was simply dark and still, and he was in the middle of it, chest deep, far from the bank, with his hands below the surface and his attention on the bottom. The alligator had been in that water before he entered it. It had registered his presence from the first moment he broke the surface and tracked him as he worked his way outward. It had not moved toward him. It had held its position and waited while the distance between them closed on its own. The alligator had been holding position somewhere in that section of the pond before he entered. It had registered his presence from the moment he broke the surface and had tracked his movement as he worked his way outward. It had not rushed. Alligators do not rush. They wait until the distance is right, and then they move. Not gradually, not with warning, but from stillness to full force in a single instant, with no intermediate state between the two. The alligator struck without warning. There was no ripple, no sound, no displacement of water that preceded the attack by enough time to register. The jaws closed around his upper left thigh with a force that was immediate and total. The teeth driving through fabric and muscle in a single compression that left no interval between contact and damage. The animal rolled immediately, rotating rapidly along its body axis while keeping the grip locked, driving him beneath the surface before he had processed what was happening. He surfaced once, arms going out instinctively. There was nothing to grab. The water was open in every direction. He went under again. The injury to the femoral region was catastrophic from the first moment of contact. The femoral artery and vein running through the upper leg sustained the kind of damage in a large alligator bite that the body cannot compensate for. Blood loss was rapid and severe, spreading through the dark water in a cloud the pond did not announce. The animal rolled again. The rotation wrenched his body with a force that disoriented completely. No sense of which direction the surface was, no ability to swim toward it, even when his arms were free. His head broke the surface. He gasped. The grip on his leg did not change. The animal held. It continued to roll. Each rotation pulled him further from the bank, further from the shallows, further from any position where he could put his feet on the bottom and push toward shore. The distance to the bank, already substantial when the attack began, was now academic. At some point, the animal released. The shallowing water near the bank limits a large alligator's ability to maintain the rolling motion. The animal needs depth to complete the rotation, and the release likely came as the struggle moved into water too shallow to continue. It is also possible the release came because the struggle had already reached its conclusion, and the animal had what it needed. He made it to the bank. The drag marks in the grass showed that much, a continuous smear of blood through the turf from the waterline to where his body came to rest, roughly 12 feet from the water's edge. The track curved slightly, the kind of path a person makes when pulling themselves forward on their arms with one leg destroyed and the other barely functional. He had gotten out of the water, that much was certain. How long he remained conscious after reaching the bank is not known. The course was empty. The nearest road carried no traffic at that hour. There were no houses within earshot. No one heard anything. He lost consciousness from blood loss before dawn, 12 feet from the water that had taken everything he could not replace. A jogger passing the eastern edge of the course at approximately 7:10 a.m. noticed a wide, dark stain at the waterline and followed it through the grass to where the body lay. He called emergency services immediately. Dennis Carver was pronounced dead at the scene, his identity confirmed later that afternoon through fingerprints. The discs he had already retrieved were stacked near the tree line, 11 of them, in a rough pile where he had been throwing them as he worked his way outward across the pond. Enough for a few days of sales. He had almost made it through another night. Wildlife trappers that morning removed one large male from the pond, 11 feet, 4 inches, 420 pounds, and a female measuring just under 9 feet the following day. Both were euthanized. A wildlife officer on scene noted at least 4 additional animals visible from the bank that morning. New signage and fencing were installed along the eastern bank within the month. The course reopened within the week. The pond remained. The alligators still in it were not removed. It was April 12, 2016, when unusually low water levels for that time of year had reduced the Zambezi River to a shadow of its wet season glory. Weeks of limited rainfall upstream had slowed the river's flow, lowering water levels across wide stretches and exposing sandbars that were normally submerged beneath fast-moving current. Shallow channels formed in areas that had once been deep, forcing both people and wildlife into narrower corridors. For the remote fishing village of Mushumbi, located approximately 40 miles downstream from Kariba, the early dry spell presented both opportunity and danger. Tafadzwa Marambwi was a 34-year-old subsistence fisherman who had lived along the Zambezi his entire life. He supported a family of 7, including his wife, 3 children, and elderly parents who depended entirely on his daily catches for food and income. Fishing near the village had become increasingly poor as shrinking water levels pushed fish into deeper channels farther from shore. Better fishing grounds existed on the opposite bank, but reaching them required crossing a channel approximately 60 feet wide. The village had discussed the danger repeatedly in recent weeks. Elders noted that crocodile sightings had increased as the water receded, particularly near the deeper seams that remained navigable. Livestock had disappeared twice that month, from similar crossing points farther upstream. Still, no alternative fishing ground offered the same yield. Rangers operating upriver had logged 3 confirmed crocodile attacks within the previous 18 months, all occurring at shallow crossings, where receding water forced predictable human movement. None had occurred directly at Mushumbi's crossing point, a fact that contributed to a growing belief among villagers that their route remained safer than others. With food stores already thin and market prices rising in nearby towns, Avoiding the crossing entirely was not considered realistic. Tafadzwa had made this crossing dozens of times over the past 3 weeks, always during daylight hours when visibility allowed him to watch for danger. The channel averaged roughly 2 feet in depth across most of its width, with a sandy bottom that provided secure footing in most places, though scoured pockets along the channel seam dropped to 3 feet or more, where current had carved deeper grooves into the riverbed. His routine involved carrying his nets and basic equipment across while moving slowly and deliberately, minimizing splashing to avoid disturbing the riverbed and alerting wildlife. The morning started like any other. Tafadzwa left his home at approximately 6:30 a.m., carrying his fishing nets bundled across his shoulders. 2 other fishermen from the village were preparing to make similar crossings farther downstream, spacing themselves apart as a precaution. The air was still, and the water appeared calm, its muddy brown surface revealing nothing of what moved beneath. Tafadzwa entered the water at his usual crossing point, a location he had used successfully for weeks. The water felt cool against his legs as he waded forward, each step careful and measured. He reached the channel's midpoint, where the bottom dropped into one of the scoured pockets, and the depth increased to approximately 3 feet, the water reaching his upper thighs and slowing his movement slightly. A thin line of reeds on the far bank trembled in the light current, and small fish broke the surface near his knees. Nothing larger showed itself. The crossing had begun to feel routine, and the narrowed channel offered fewer places for danger to reveal itself early. Reduced flow had also intensified current along the deeper seam, creating a subtle downstream pull that concentrated fish and other prey species along that line. Such compression points often become preferred ambush locations for large crocodiles during early dry conditions, when both livestock and people are funneled into limited crossing paths. Nile crocodiles represent Africa's largest freshwater predator, with mature males commonly exceeding 16 feet in length and weighing over 1,600 pounds. These apex predators possess the strongest measured bite force of any living animal. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks from concealment, using powerful tail strokes to propel their massive bodies forward with devastating speed. Crocodiles can remain completely motionless and submerged for extended periods, their eyes and nostrils breaking the surface while the rest of the body remains hidden below. During drought conditions, crocodiles concentrate near remaining deep water and known crossing points, increasing the danger for animals and humans forced to move through narrowed channels. A large male crocodile rested in slightly deeper water, roughly 15 feet from Tafadzwa's position. The mature animal had long been associated with this stretch of river, where reduced water levels funneled prey into predictable paths. Tafadzwa's slow movement through the channel had likely drawn the reptile's attention before he reached the deepest section. The attack came without warning. The crocodile surged forward from concealment, sending a violent wave of water across the channel as its massive body lunged. Its jaws clamped around Tafadzwa's right leg, just above the knee, the interlocking teeth driving deep into muscle and biting against bone. The impact knocked him sideways, his nets flying from his shoulders as he collapsed into the water. A single scream carried across the river as the crocodile initiated a powerful roll. The animal spun its body while maintaining its grip, using rotational force to disable its prey. The initial rotation shattered bone and tore through muscle, instantly robbing Tafadzwa of control over his leg. The violent torque of the second rotation wrenched his lower body at an angle the human frame was never meant to endure, causing severe spinal trauma that left him unable to resist as the crocodile pulled him beneath the surface. The fishermen downstream heard the cry and saw the water erupt in violent churn, but they were too far away to see more than flashes of movement and turbulence. The crocodile dragged Tafadzwa deeper, the combined force of the animal's weight and the rolling motion making any recovery impossible. His body, already shutting down from the catastrophic spinal injuries sustained during the roll, took on water rapidly once submerged. Drowning followed within minutes. Less than a minute after the initial strike, the surface grew still. The crocodile had moved its prey toward a submerged log a short distance from the crossing point, an area that offered natural cover as the animal secured the body. The fishermen ran back to the village, bringing dozens of residents to the riverbank. Village elders stopped anyone from entering the water, aware that any rescue attempt would be futile and dangerous given the presence of the crocodile. A messenger traveled to the nearest town with radio access, contacting wildlife authorities by mid-afternoon. A search team arrived the following morning with armed rangers. Tafadzwa's body was recovered from the river approximately 30 yards downstream from the crossing. Officials concluded he had been killed by a crocodile, succumbing to severe traumatic injuries compounded by drowning. The crossing was marked as extremely dangerous, though the village's isolation meant residents would continue facing similar risks. It was February 11, 2016, when the morning sun climbed over the low buildings of Capricorn Crocodile Farm, located approximately 30 miles west of Rockhampton in central Queensland. The facility housed over 4,000 crocodiles across various enclosures, operating as both a tourist attraction and a commercial breeding operation for leather production. Most of the animals were juveniles kept in long rows of grow-out pens behind the scenes, while only a handful of large adults were used for public demonstrations. The late summer heat had already settled in, with a hazy blue sky and temperatures climbing toward 89 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-morning. Trevor Doyle was a 38-year-old senior reptile handler who had worked at Capricorn for nearly 11 years. His daily responsibilities included feeding demonstrations, enclosure maintenance, and supervising junior staff during public tours. Doyle had developed a reputation for showmanship during feeding sessions, often narrating crocodile behavior to audiences while maneuvering within feet of the animals. Management had previously cautioned him about working too close to certain aggressive individuals, but Doyle's experience had bred a dangerous confidence. The morning feeding demonstration was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. in the main viewing arena, a concrete walled enclosure featuring a rectangular pool surrounded by elevated walkways where tourists could observe safely. Approximately 40 visitors had gathered that morning, many holding smartphones and cameras to document the spectacle. The facility's own security cameras recorded all activity in the arena from multiple angles. Standard procedure required a second staff member to remain outside the enclosure gate with keys and a radio, while another stood on the walkway with a control pole in case an animal surged at the edge. The arena itself was designed with a painted standoff line and a low inner rail meant to discourage handlers from stepping into the true strike zone. But during routine shows, the line was treated more like a suggestion than a hard rule, especially by veterans who thought they knew the animals. While the camera system covered much of the arena, blind spots remained near the waterline and beneath the elevated walkways. The footage that would later be reviewed captured only portions of what followed, with key moments obscured by splashing water, concrete barriers, and the rapid movement of both the handler and the animal. Investigators relied on a combination of video, eyewitness accounts, and injury patterns to reconstruct the full sequence of events. The target crocodile was a 17-foot saltwater male named Rocco, estimated at approximately 60 years old and weighing close to 1,400 pounds. Rocco had arrived at the facility in 2002 after being captured near a populated area following several livestock kills. His size and aggressive temperament made him a popular attraction, though handlers had learned to approach him with caution during the decade he had been in captivity. Doyle entered the enclosure carrying a long pole with fresh chicken suspended from the end, his standard method for conducting feeding demonstrations. The protocol required handlers to remain at least 15 feet from the water's edge during feeding, using the pole's length to maintain distance. However, Doyle had developed a habit of closing that gap during demonstrations, believing his experience allowed him to read warning signs that less experienced staff might miss. Rocco had been motionless in the water for over 20 minutes, his massive body submerged with only his eyes and nostrils visible above the surface. The crocodile's dark olive coloring blended seamlessly with the algae-tinted water, making his exact position difficult to pinpoint from the tourist's elevated perspective. To experienced handlers, that stillness wasn't calm. It was a loaded spring. Saltwater crocodiles often park beneath an edge, conserving energy and waiting for movement that looks like food. From the walkway, tourists could see only the eyes, but staff knew the rest of the body was angled like a trap, tail coiled, back legs tucked, head pointed toward the shallow ledge where feedings usually happened. The second staff member on the walkway later told investigators they'd noticed Rocco drifting closer in small, almost lazy adjustments. Barely a ripple. It was the kind of movement you miss if you're talking to a crowd, but it's the kind of movement that changes everything. Saltwater crocodiles represent the largest living reptile species, with mature males in northern Australia regularly exceeding 16 feet in length and weighing over 2,000 pounds in exceptional cases. These apex predators possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, capable of generating pressures exceeding 3,700 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks, launching from water with devastating speed to clamp onto victims before executing violent death rolls designed to disorient prey and cause massive trauma. Despite their enormous size, Saltwater crocodiles can accelerate from stillness to full attack speed in less than 1 second, closing distances of 15 feet before most humans can react. Doyle stepped past the painted standoff line and leaned over the low inner rail, approaching within 8 feet of the water's edge as he dangled the chicken roughly 3 feet above the surface and explained how crocodiles use their powerful tails for propulsion. The attack happened faster than the human eye could process. Rocco surged from the pool in a violent forward and up lunge, his head and shoulders clearing the concrete lip as his jaws snapped shut around Doyle's right arm just above the elbow. The bite didn't just puncture, it locked, pinning the limb in place as pressure and twisting force tore through muscle and opened major vessels in seconds. The shock of it stole Doyle's footing, and the slick concrete at the edge gave him nothing to brace against. The sudden force of the strike knocked Doyle off balance, dragging him down and sideways over the pool's edge as the crocodile's weight and grip pulled both bodies into the water. Doyle's screams cut through the morning air as Rocco began the death roll, spinning his massive body in rapid, violent rotations while maintaining his grip on the handler's arm. During the violent rolling, the force wrenched Doyle's shoulder out of place, tearing ligaments and muscle as his body was whipped through the water. Tourist cameras captured the churning chaos of thrashing water and the brief glimpses of Doyle's face breaking the surface, his mouth open in silent agony before being pulled under again. The security footage captured critical portions of the attack from multiple angles. Though rapid movement, water spray, and structural blind spots obscured parts of the struggle as Rocco continued rolling, each surge of motion tearing additional tissue from Doyle's arm. The violent rolling lasted only seconds before the crocodile's body bumped the concrete wall, and the angle robbed it of a clean, continuous spin. Doyle managed to wrench himself free and surface in a burst of foam, clawing toward the nearest edge with his left hand. But as he lunged for the concrete, Rocco surged again from just beneath the surface, more a snap than a full strike, catching Doyle across the lower ribs and dragging him back into the water before slipping away into the deeper section of the pool. The second bite clamped onto Doyle's torso just below his ribcage, the massive jaws crushing several ribs and penetrating deep into his abdominal cavity. Rocco surged into a brutal thrash, jerking side to side and attempting short roll motions against the concrete, while Doyle's body went limp as consciousness faded from blood loss and shock. The fatal damage occurred during this second attack, with Rocco's teeth lacerating major blood vessels and causing catastrophic internal hemorrhaging. Two junior handlers rushed along the elevated walkway, staying outside the inner barrier rather than entering the arena. One hammered the metal rail with a control pole, while the other blasted a compressed air horn in short, aggressive bursts, noise and vibration meant to break the animal's focus long enough for a retreat. When Rocco slipped back toward deeper water, they dropped a looped rope line and extended poles toward Doyle, snagging his shirt and dragging him the last few feet to the edge without putting another person within reach. Doyle was unconscious when he was dragged from the pool, his right arm barely attached at the upper tissue, and his torso showing massive crushing trauma. The facility's first aid response began immediately. Pressure dressings, improvised tourniquet attempts, and CPR as staff radioed emergency services. An emergency helicopter was dispatched and arrived roughly 20 minutes later after a landing zone was secured. The park maintained a cleared landing strip used for livestock transfers and medical incidents, which staff sprinted to reopen and mark while others continued life-saving efforts. But the blood loss was too fast and too severe, and Doyle was pronounced dead before he could be stabilized for transport. The investigation conducted by state wildlife officials reviewed all camera footage and determined that Doyle had violated established safety protocols by approaching too close to the water's edge. Capricorn Crocodile Farm suspended public feeding demonstrations indefinitely following the incident and implemented mandatory minimum distance requirements for all handler interactions with large crocodiles. While the Queensland facility had claimed an experienced handler thousands of miles away in Southeast Asia, another crocodile farm would soon demonstrate how quickly routine feeding operations could turn fatal. It was June 12, 2016, along the remote banks of the Chobe River in northern Botswana, where the African wilderness stretches endlessly under the scorching sun. The Chobe River winds through one of Africa's most pristine ecosystems, supporting massive herds of elephants, buffalo, and countless other species. During the dry season, the river becomes a concentrated hunting ground, where predators and prey converge at the water's edge. Tessa Reid, a 28-year-old wildlife photographer from London, had traveled to this remote corner of Botswana with her boyfriend Tommy, to document authentic African safari experiences for her adventure travel blog. Unlike most tourists who stayed in established safari camps with guided excursions, Tessa deliberately sought more adventurous experiences for her content. Her fearless, thrill-seeking personality drove her to pursue unique perspectives in pursuit of the perfect shot. The couple had hired a local guide with a small motorboat to navigate the Chobe River during the golden hour of early morning. The guide had explained that the Chobe River contained one of Africa's largest populations of Nile crocodiles, apex predators, that remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. These ancient reptiles were particularly active during the dry season, when prey animals were forced to drink from shrinking water sources. Tessa was focused on getting dramatic sunrise shots that would showcase the river's wildlife for her upcoming London photography exhibition. She had chosen this specific morning excursion because the light reflected perfectly off the water, creating ideal conditions for the photographs she needed. The Nile crocodile is Africa's largest freshwater predator, capable of growing up to 11 to 16 feet in length and weighing over 1,000 pounds. These prehistoric hunters possess one of the most powerful bite forces in the animal kingdom, delivering up to 5,000 pounds per square inch of crushing pressure. Their hunting strategy relies on perfect camouflage and explosive ambush attacks, remaining motionless for hours while waiting for prey to approach the water's edge. During the dry season, Nile crocodiles become increasingly aggressive as competition for food intensifies. They position themselves in shallow areas near drinking spots, their eyes and nostrils barely visible above the waterline. Their mottled brown and green coloration makes them virtually invisible against the muddy riverbank. Their boat glided through a stunning section of the river, just as the sun began to rise at 5:30 a.m. Tessa's desire to capture the soft, early light unwittingly placed them in the water during the crocodile's most dangerous hours, dawn and dusk, when these predators actively hunt animals coming to the shore to drink. As Tessa leaned over the side of the boat to capture a low-angle shot of the sunrise reflecting on the water, she stretched too far. The boat rocked unexpectedly, and she lost her balance, tumbling headfirst into the murky water with a loud splash. As she surfaced, disoriented and gasping, she remained unaware that a 12-foot Nile crocodile lay perfectly camouflaged just meters away. The massive predator had been waiting motionless in the murky water since before dawn, and the sudden splash had triggered its predatory instincts. Within seconds of Tessa entering the water, the crocodile struck with lightning speed. Massive jaws, lined with conical teeth, clamped down on her left hip and upper thigh with devastating force. The initial bite tore through muscle and connective tissue, severing the femoral artery and triggering blood loss and trauma that would incapacitate her over the next several minutes. The sheer force of the bite destabilized her lower body as blood poured into the water, sending her into traumatic shock within the next several minutes. The conical teeth punched deep into her upper thigh, shredding muscle and blood vessels while anchoring her leg in the crocodile's grip. Within seconds, Tessa was suffering from massive blood loss and traumatic shock. The crocodile immediately began its signature death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and tear tissue apart. The torque violently twisted her lower body, tearing muscle and destabilizing her hips, while the severed artery continued to pump blood into the water. The rolling motion shredded muscle and connective tissue, worsening blood loss and rapidly weakening her. The crocodile dragged Tessa into deeper water during the death roll. The massive blood loss and trauma rapidly weakened her. Over several minutes, shock and eventual submersion caused her to lose consciousness. Tommy and the guide witnessed the attack unfold in horror, but by the time they could react, Tessa had already disappeared beneath the surface. The entire attack had lasted less than 2 minutes, and the crocodile had already retreated to deeper water with its prey. Local authorities launched an immediate search operation, but the Chobe River's murky waters made recovery efforts extremely difficult. 3 days later, officials located Tessa's remains wedged beneath submerged roots along the riverbank, where the crocodile had temporarily cached the body. The incident sparked renewed discussions about safari safety protocols and the importance of maintaining proper precautions during river excursions. Tessa's death became a sobering reminder that Africa's wilderness demands absolute respect, even from the relative safety of a boat. It was June 14th, 2016, at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa in Orlando, Florida, when what should have been a magical family vacation turned into an unthinkable nightmare. The Seven Seas Lagoon stretched across the resort property like a shimmering mirror, its man-made waters connecting Disney's most luxurious accommodations to the Magic Kingdom theme park. Palm trees swayed gently in the warm evening breeze as families gathered along the sandy shoreline to witness the nightly fireworks spectacular, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The lagoon itself represented a marvel of Disney engineering, spanning over 170 acres and carved from Florida's natural wetlands, creating a habitat where local wildlife, including occasional alligators, could thrive. The lagoon featured shallow, gently sloped shorelines that transitioned into deeper navigation channels farther from land, a design intended for boat traffic rather than swimming. Lush landscaping surrounded the lagoon's perimeter, creating an illusion of paradise while concealing the wild nature that still lurked beneath the surface. Matt and Melissa Graves had traveled from their home in Elkhorn, Nebraska, with their 2 young children for what they hoped would be the trip of a lifetime. The family had been staying at the prestigious resort since Sunday, immersing themselves in the Disney magic that promised to create memories lasting forever. Matt, a devoted father who worked in the insurance industry, had saved for months to afford this dream vacation. Melissa, a caring mother dedicated to raising their children, had spent weeks planning every detail to create the perfect family experience. Their 4-year-old daughter played nearby in the sand, while 2-year-old Lane Thomas Graves, a curious and energetic toddler standing just 37 inches tall and weighing 30 pounds, had become fascinated with building sandcastles along the water's edge. His blonde hair caught the last rays of sunlight as he worked with the focused determination that only young children possess when engaged in play. The lagoon's gentle waves lapped against the shore as Lane filled his small bucket with water, wading no more than ankle deep into what appeared to be perfectly safe resort waters. The evening air filled with laughter from other families enjoying the outdoor movie screening and anticipating the fireworks display. The resort's atmosphere had been carefully crafted to eliminate any sense of danger, with uniformed Disney cast members ensuring guests felt completely safe and secure. Unknown to the Nebraska family, the Seven Seas Lagoon harbored a deadly predator that had remained hidden beneath its deceptively calm surface. American alligators, apex predators that had ruled Florida's waterways for millions of years, possessed an evolutionary perfection designed for one purpose: killing. These reptiles are often called living dinosaurs, with a body plan largely unchanged for millions of years, designed for aquatic ambush predation. The species had survived multiple mass extinction events through their incredible adaptability and efficient killing mechanisms. An adult alligator's body operated like a biological weapon, with every feature optimized for hunting and survival. Their muscular tails provided both propulsion through water and devastating striking power. These reptiles could remain motionless for hours, their eyes and nostrils barely breaking the surface while their powerful bodies lay submerged in patient ambush. An adult alligator's bite force is measured at over 2,000 pounds per square inch, among the strongest ever recorded in the animal kingdom. The particular alligator lurking in the lagoon measured approximately 8 feet in length, its muscular body weighing several hundred pounds of pure predatory power. Years of successful hunting had shaped its instincts, conditioning it to respond automatically to movement and disturbance in the water. Its behavior was driven by instinctive predatory responses refined through millions of years of evolution to recognize splashing sounds and movements that indicated potential victims. The reptile's eyes, positioned on top of its skull, allowed it to survey the shoreline while remaining virtually invisible beneath the water's surface. Sensory organs along its jaw could detect even subtle vibrations in the water, alerting it to nearby movement. As Lane continued his innocent play, the alligator detected the rhythmic splashing that triggered its predatory instincts. The child's small movements in the shallow water created vibrations that traveled through the lagoon like a dinner bell, alerting the hidden predator to potential prey. The splashing provided enough sensory input to indicate movement and vulnerability, sufficient to trigger a predatory response. The alligator began to move beneath the water's surface, using its low profile and patience, hunting as it had for millions of years. Its powerful tail provided propulsion, while barely disturbing the water's surface, allowing it to close the distance without creating any visible wake. The reptile closed the distance silently, remaining undetected beneath the surface. Matt Graves stood just feet away from his son, watching the toddler's playful activities while enjoying the peaceful evening atmosphere. The father's protective instincts remained alert, but the resort environment had been designed to create complete safety and security. The resort had posted signs indicating that swimming was prohibited, but there were no prominent warnings specifically alerting guests to the presence of alligators. The attack came without warning, shattering the peaceful evening in an explosion of violence that lasted mere seconds but changed everything forever. The alligator exploded from the water with lightning speed, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth designed to grip and crush. The reptile's powerful muscles propelled its body forward like a missile, targeting Lane's head and upper torso with precision perfected over millions of years. The predator's initial strike demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of nature's perfect killing machine. The alligator seized Lane by the upper body and immediately pulled backward toward deeper water with overwhelming force. The impact lifted the toddler completely from the shallow water as the alligator's bite penetrated his scalp and skull, causing catastrophic injuries that immediately incapacitated him. The alligator thrashed violently as it retreated toward deeper water, using its immense strength to overpower its prey. Matt Graves reacted instantly to the horrific scene, his paternal instincts overriding any concern for personal safety. As he rushed into the lagoon, the father reached the animal within seconds, desperately attempting to pull his son free as the alligator continued retreating into deeper water in a frantic attempt to free his son. The alligator's jaws operated like a biological vice, designed by nature to maintain their grip once prey was captured. Matt's fingers encountered the sharp edges of the predator's teeth as he struggled against the animal's overwhelming strength, feeling the warm blood from his son's wounds while fighting against millions of years of evolutionary perfection. The father's hands suffered deep lacerations as he attempted to pry apart jaws that could crush turtle shells and snap large bones with ease. The alligator, now threatened by the father's intervention, increased its efforts to escape with its prey. The reptile's powerful neck muscles twisted and turned as it fought against Matt's desperate grip. Its primitive brain focused solely on completing the kill and retreating to safety. Melissa Graves also entered the water, adding her efforts to the impossible rescue attempt as the family fought against nature's most efficient predator. The alligator's superior strength and aquatic advantages proved insurmountable. The reptile broke free from the father's grasp and immediately submerged, carrying Lane into the deeper waters where darkness swallowed them both. Despite the parents' efforts, the alligator submerged with the child, and Lane was unable to survive the attack. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the Disney community and beyond, forcing a complete reevaluation of safety protocols unchanged for decades. Emergency responders launched an extensive 16-hour search operation involving dozens of personnel, boats, helicopters, and sonar equipment. Wildlife officials captured and euthanized 6 alligators from the lagoon, though they could never definitively identify which animal had killed Lane. Disney immediately implemented sweeping safety changes across all resort properties, installing fences and barriers along waterfront areas, while adding warning signs about wildlife dangers. The company also restricted guest access to lagoon and lake areas, acknowledging the oversight that had contributed to the tragedy. The Graves family later established the Lane Thomas Foundation to honor their son's memory by supporting families dealing with pediatric organ transplants. It was May 22, 2016, and the Wenlock River carved its ancient path through the remote wilderness of Cape York Peninsula, where the muddy waters concealed submerged banks, deep scour holes, and animal travel corridors that had claimed lives for decades. The late afternoon sun cast low-angle glare across the surface, flattening depth perception and masking surface disturbances, creating conditions that favored ambush along the river's margins. Kellen Jory had worked as a warehouse safety officer in Cairns for 6 years, building a reputation for systematic risk assessment and careful protocol enforcement. At 29, he was accustomed to identifying hazards in controlled environments, particularly mechanical and procedural failures, and had logged dozens of solo kayaking trips across North Queensland rivers without prior incident. In the weeks leading up to this trip, he scheduled several days off and planned a solo paddle during the early dry season, when river levels begin to fall and wildlife concentrates around permanent water. Kellen chose the Wenlock because not many people paddled the upper parts of the river. That meant less boat traffic, but it also meant more wildlife and fewer disturbances. Friends warned him about the saltwater crocodiles in Cape York, but he had only ever seen them from far away, never up close. He told others he would stay in the middle of the river and away from the banks, which many paddlers believe is safer. although Queensland wildlife authorities specifically advise keeping a wide distance, at least 16 feet, from riverbanks, especially near undercut sections and slide marks. The safety rules he followed at work didn't carry over to a river where danger can stay hidden and move in seconds. The Wenlock River supports a stable population of saltwater crocodiles, with deep pools, undercut banks, and abundant prey, providing reliable hunting territory. Mature males can exceed 16 to 18 feet in length and weigh over 1,500 pounds. Their bite force has been measured at more than 3,000 pounds per square inch, sufficient to fracture bone and crush small watercraft hulls made of thin polyethylene. In turbid water, crocodiles often position themselves along shaded banks or beneath undercut ledges, exposing only the eyes and nostrils, while remaining motionless for long periods. Field observations show that ambush strikes are typically launched from within a few feet of the water's edge, targeting animals that pass close to the bank. As Kellen paddled downstream, he kept an easy, steady rhythm, dipping the blade into the dark water and pulling through in smooth, controlled strokes. The current was slow, offering little resistance against the bow. Along the left bank, fresh slide marks cut through the mud, wide, smooth channels where something heavy had moved from land into the water. The surrounding mud was pressed into long arcs, the edges still damp and sharply defined. He glanced toward them and casually commented that they looked like pig tracks, then continued without slowing. The surface remained flat and windless, disturbed only by the quiet entry and exit of his paddle. In conditions that calm, even minor vibrations carry efficiently through the water. Ahead, overhanging branches narrowed the channel into a shaded tunnel, sunlight breaking through in thin strips across the surface. To avoid clipping the limbs, he adjusted his line toward the right bank, guiding the kayak to within roughly 3 to 4 feet of the muddy edge. The bend tightened gradually. Erosion had eaten into the bank, carving a hollow beneath the surface where soil hung over a darker pocket of water. From above, the undercut appeared as a simple shadow. Beneath it, a large saltwater crocodile held position. Only the top of its skull and nostrils intermittently broke the surface, blending with floating leaves and glare. The animal was later estimated by wildlife officers at approximately 15 feet in length, based on trap measurements taken after removal. Its body remained almost entirely submerged, aligned parallel to the bank. As the kayak drifted past the undercut, it entered the animal's strike range, within a few feet of the bank. The water near the hull remained smooth until the final instant. The attack began as a sudden upward surge from beneath the right side of the kayak. The surface erupted in a burst of brown water and foam. A sharp cracking sound cut through the quiet as the hull flexed under impact. Rather than a clean bite through the center, the crocodile's jaws struck high along the cockpit rim, a common target point when attacking floating objects near the surface. The plastic compressed inward with a hollow snap. The force lifted the kayak's right side abruptly, tilting it toward the muddy bank. Kellen's weight shifted without warning. His paddle struck the water at an awkward angle, glanced off the surface, and slipped from his grip. The kayak rolled harder to the side as the crocodile's mass drove into it from below and slightly behind, using forward thrust to destabilize the narrow hull. Water poured over the edge as the craft tipped past its balance point. Kellen reached outward to brace himself, but the angle steepened too quickly. The crocodile lunged again, this time seizing his lower body as he fell from the seat into knee-deep water along the shoreline. Its jaws closed across his thighs, a typical strike zone when prey enters the water near the bank. The animal immediately pulled backward with rotational force. The plastic hull cracked along an existing stress line near the cockpit as the crocodile's weight dragged it sideways. From first impact to submersion, the sequence lasted only seconds. The kayak flipped completely, slammed upside down against the surface, and split along its weakened seam. One half was pulled briefly beneath the water before breaking free. The other drifted several yards downstream. Below the surface, the crocodile rotated along its long axis in a rolling motion. The twisting force pulled Kellen sideways and downward. Large crocodiles use this maneuver to destabilize and drown prey. The spinning stirred heavy sediment from the riverbed, clouding the water to near zero visibility. Severe crushing trauma to the upper legs would have caused extensive soft tissue damage and likely fractured the femur or pelvis. Such injuries can disrupt major blood vessels, including the femoral arteries, leading to rapid external and internal bleeding. As he was held underwater, involuntary inhalation of water would occur once the airway was submerged. The crocodile maintained its grip and pressed downward beneath the overhang. At the surface, the river churned briefly. Brown foam and bubbles rose, then flattened. Fragments of plastic surfaced and drifted. The paddle spun once before catching against a snag. Underwater, the crocodile remained close to the bank. Saltwater crocodiles commonly hold prey submerged until movement stops. Coordinated movement ceased quickly. Massive blood loss combined with forced submersion can cause loss of consciousness in well under a minute, particularly when the airway remains underwater. The crocodile did not resurface with visible prey. Instead, it held beneath the undercut bank in deeper water, out of sight. Within seconds, the river returned to a flat, undisturbed surface. Small fragments of debris drifted slowly with the current. Two recreational fishermen positioned downstream heard a sharp cracking sound carry from the bend. Moments later, they saw pieces of plastic moving past them in the current. No kayak remained upright. One of the men stood and scanned the shaded narrowing of the channel, focusing on the overhanging bank, but the surface showed no ripples or signs of struggle. They waited, expecting someone to surface. When nothing appeared, they moved toward higher ground along the bank to improve reception and contacted emergency services, reporting drifting debris and a suspected crocodile strike near the bend. Rangers and local responders reached the nearest access track approximately 75 minutes later. Standard protocol in crocodile-inhabited waterways requires visual assessment before entering the water. Officers scanned the banks and waited for additional personnel before approaching the undercut area. Because crocodiles may remain near a kill site, water entry was delayed until the area could be secured. The damaged kayak was retrieved first. Search efforts the following day located remains beneath the bank consistent with a large crocodile attack, including crushing trauma and tissue loss, typical of drowning and rotational feeding behavior. Wildlife officers later trapped and removed a large male crocodile from the immediate area, measuring approximately 15 feet in length. Regional reporting referenced the fatal wildlife encounter without releasing graphic details. The affected stretch of river was updated on local advisory maps with stronger warnings regarding saltwater crocodile activity. The coroner's report concluded that death resulted from catastrophic lower body trauma with rapid blood loss, followed by drowning. Medical findings determined that loss of consciousness would have occurred quickly due to combined vascular injury and hypoxia. The injuries in sequence were consistent with documented saltwater crocodile attacks in northern Australia, where proximity to undercut banks significantly increases strike risk. It was May 2014. Recent rainfall had swollen the rivers across Mindanao's remote interior, pushing water into channels and banks that were dry or shallow most of the year. The river Antonio Vargas fished moved slowly despite the increased volume, its surface dark with suspended sediment. Underwater visibility was near zero. Antonio Vargas was 39 years old and had fished the same stretch of river for over a decade, setting nets in the evening and checking them at dawn. The net tangled overnight in a cluster of submerged branches had to be dealt with. Replacing it would cost more than a week's earnings. He had retrieved tangled nets before. He knew how to work quickly, how to free mesh without tearing it, how to minimize the time he spent in the water. He had a system. He had used it at this spot, at this hour, more times than he could count. The river was as familiar to him as the path to his own door. That familiarity was not the same thing as safety, and the difference between the two is not always visible until it is too late to act on it. He had seen crocodiles in the area. Everyone in the village had, but the sightings had always been at a distance. An animal crossing upstream, a shape disappearing from a sandbar at dusk. Never close. Never during his morning rounds. Never when he was in the water. The absence of close encounters had become, in his mind, something close to a pattern of safety. It was not. The absence of an event is not evidence that the event cannot occur. It is only evidence that it has not occurred yet. Saltwater crocodiles are among the largest living reptiles, with mature males reaching 17 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds. They are opportunistic apex predators equipped with sensory systems specifically adapted for ambush in low-visibility water. Rows of dome-shaped pressure receptors along the jaw and body, integumentary sense organs, detect minute vibrations and pressure changes in the water with enough sensitivity to track the position of prey without visual input. A person wading into a river where a saltwater crocodile holds position is being tracked from the moment their foot breaks the surface. The animal does not need to see them. It does not need to hear them. It only needs to hold its position and wait until the prey moves within range. The strike, when it comes, is one of the fastest movements in the animal kingdom. Explosive acceleration from complete stillness that covers the intervening distance before the prey has time to register that something is wrong. During periods of high water, crocodiles relocate into flooded channels and sections of river where they are not typically found. The recent rainfall had done exactly that, pushing animals upstream into sections Antonio had worked without incident for years. The surface gave no indication of this. The river looked the same as it always did at that hour. Antonio waded in. The water rose from his ankles to his knees to mid-thigh as the bottom dropped away. The mud was soft and the footing uncertain, each step requiring a moment to find solid ground before shifting weight forward. He reached the tangle and began working the net free, one loop at a time, carefully to avoid tearing the mesh. He had been in the water for several minutes before he made significant progress. The work required both hands and most of his attention. His body bent slightly forward, his weight shifted toward the branches, positioned in a way that made fast movement in any direction difficult. He was not thinking about crocodiles. He was thinking about the net, about the sequence of loops and how to free them without pulling the whole thing tighter, about the cost of replacing it if he tore it, about getting back to the bank with the net intact and the day's work recoverable. The river was doing what it always did around him, moving slowly, carrying sediment, giving nothing away about what it held. The crocodile had been holding position along the riverbed since before dawn, motionless in less than 4 feet of water, its coloration indistinguishable from the sediment dark bottom. It had been there before Antonio reached the bank. It tracked his entry and every movement through pressure changes in the water without shifting its own position. No ripple, no sound, nothing on the surface to indicate its presence. When Antonio took a half step deeper to reach the remaining section of tangled net, the distance closed to within strike range. The crocodile went from complete stillness to full acceleration in the same instant. The attack covered the gap in under 2 seconds. No surface disturbance, no sound, no warning of any kind. The jaws closed around his upper thigh and hip with force that was immediate and catastrophic, the bite compressing and tearing the major vascular structures of the proximal leg on first contact. The impact knocked him sideways. He screamed, briefly, sharply, before the animal reversed direction and dragged him away from the bank into deeper water. His hands reached for the branches he had been working. They were already gone. His feet left the bottom. The surface closed over him. The crocodile initiated a death roll, spinning along its body axis with Antonio locked in its grip. The rotation tore through ligaments and muscle and destroyed any sense of orientation. No up, no down, no direction toward air. He surfaced once, arms reaching upward, and was pulled under again before he could draw a full breath. The effort of resisting the roll burned through what oxygen remained in his lungs faster than struggling alone would have. Blood spread through the water in a dark, rapid cloud that neither of them could see, but that the water carried downstream regardless. The vascular damage was producing blood loss at a rate his body had no means of compensating for. Oxygen deprivation and hemorrhage progressed together, each accelerating the other. His movements weakened, became uncoordinated, then stopped entirely. He lost consciousness within minutes of the first contact. The river continued moving slowly around him, its surface smooth and unbroken, as though nothing had occurred beneath it. The net was still tangled in the branches. The branches were still in the water. Nothing at the surface marked what had happened below it. His absence was noted when he failed to return by mid-morning. Family members found his sandals, his basket tipped on its side at the mud's edge, and the partially retrieved net still tangled in the branches exactly as he had left it. A search team arrived by boat that afternoon and located his body approximately 200 feet downstream, submerged near a tangle of roots and water, deep enough that it required the boat to find him. The medical examiner listed drowning and blood loss as joint causes of death. A large male, 14 feet, 2 inches, was taken on a baited line 2 days later near where the body had been recovered and euthanized. Whether it was the animal responsible could not be confirmed, but its size and location were consistent. It was the largest animal anyone in the village recalled being pulled from that stretch of river. Community leaders issued recommendations that nets be checked from shore using long poles, and that no one enter the water alone during or after high water. A small marker was placed at the bank near where Antonio's basket had been found. It remained there for years, weathering slowly. It was November 8, 2015, and the wet season was approaching the top end. The afternoon heat had reached oppressive levels, with temperatures exceeding 95 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity making the air feel thick and heavy. A remote camping area located approximately 15 miles from the main tourist routes near Kakadu had attracted a small group of backpackers seeking authentic outback experiences away from crowded facilities. Darren Holsworth was a 28-year-old backpacker from Perth who had been traveling through the Northern Territory for 3 weeks. His journey represented a gap-year adventure before returning to office work, and he had developed a pattern of seeking increasingly remote locations in pursuit of what he considered authentic experiences. His traveling companion, who remained behind at camp with their equipment, had repeatedly expressed concern about Darren's tendency to take unnecessary risks. The camping area sat roughly 200 yards from a billabong, a seasonal waterhole that had been clearly marked with multiple warning signs. The signs explicitly stated the presence of dangerous saltwater crocodiles, and prohibited approaching within 15 feet of the water's edge. Additional signage warned that crocodile activity increased dramatically during dusk and dawn, and that crocodiles were known to move through surrounding grassland between water sources. Darren had spent the day hiking in brutal heat, returning to camp drenched in sweat and eager to explore the area before sunset. Despite his companion's reminders about the warning signs, Darren set off alone toward the billabong to photograph the landscape during golden hour. Rather than following the marked trail, he cut through a stretch of tall grass that grew thick and high along the low ground between the campsite and the water's edge. The grass, fed by seasonal moisture, stood well above waist height in places, obscuring the ground entirely. Visitor briefings distributed at regional ranger stations specifically warned that tall riparian grass should be treated as potential crocodile cover during late afternoon hours. The advisory recommended remaining on marked trails at all times and avoiding low-visibility ground between campsites and water sources. The vegetation also masked subtle depressions in the earth, where larger animals had rested earlier in the day. Rangers had documented several instances that season of crocodiles traveling overland during late afternoon heat to position themselves near shaded ground before dusk. These movements were rarely visible to visitors, as the reptiles remained completely motionless once settled, their broad backs blending seamlessly into mud-darkened grass. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, Darren pushed deeper into the grass. The time was approximately 6:45 p.m., the beginning of peak predator activity. Long shadows stretched across the landscape, and the dense vegetation muffled sound in every direction. Darren moved steadily, his camera in hand, focused entirely on reaching a vantage point near the water. Saltwater crocodiles represent the largest living reptile species, with mature males regularly exceeding 20 feet in length and weighing over 2,200 pounds. These apex predators possess highly developed sensory systems, capable of detecting vibrations and subtle ground disturbances through specialized receptors along their jaws. While primarily aquatic hunters, saltwater crocodiles frequently travel overland between water sources, particularly during seasonal transitions when water levels shift. They are known to rest in dense vegetation near billabongs, their dark, mottled bodies virtually invisible among grass and mud. A saltwater crocodile can launch from a stationary position with explosive speed, covering short distances far faster than any human can react. Their bite force is among the strongest measured in the animal kingdom, capable of inflicting catastrophic, often fatal injuries in a single strike. When encountered on land away from water, crocodiles are more likely to deliver a defensive strike and disengage than to initiate sustained predatory behavior, particularly when startled at close range. A large male crocodile had settled into the tall grass approximately 50 yards from the billabong's edge, resting in a shallow depression where moisture kept the ground cool. The animal had likely moved from the water earlier in the day and remained concealed as the temperature dropped toward evening. Its massive body lay motionless among the vegetation, completely hidden from anyone approaching on foot. Darren was within feet of the animal before anything registered. The crocodile exploded from the grass with terrifying speed, lunging low and striking before Darren could react. The massive jaws clamped around his upper thigh and hip, the interlocking teeth driving deep into muscle and grinding against bone. The force of the strike knocked him off his feet instantly, dragging him to the ground as the animal's weight bore down. The crocodile thrashed violently, wrenching its head side to side while maintaining its grip. The rotational force shattered Darren's pelvis and tore through major blood vessels in the thigh, causing rapid and catastrophic blood loss. His screams carried across the open ground, and voices from the nearby campsite responded almost immediately, shouts and the clatter of metal carrying through the still evening air. The sudden commotion from multiple directions triggered the crocodile's disengagement. Away from its aquatic territory and confronted by additional noise and movement it could not control, the animal released its grip, abandoned the encounter, and retreated low through the grass toward the billabong, disappearing into the water within moments. Darren's companion heard the screams and ran toward the sound, finding him in the flattened grass roughly 100 yards from camp. Other backpackers contacted emergency services by satellite phone within minutes, but the remote terrain delayed responders for over an hour. Rangers arrived equipped to secure the area in case the crocodile remained nearby, but the animal had already withdrawn into the billabong. Darren had lost consciousness before help arrived. He was pronounced dead at the scene from catastrophic blood loss caused by severe injuries to the thigh, hip, and pelvis. Investigators concluded that Darren had left marked trails and moved through dense vegetation in an area with clearly posted crocodile warnings. Officials determined The death resulted from entering known crocodile habitat on foot during peak activity hours, in violation of posted safety restrictions. Wichai Srisongkram was a 46-year-old farmer who had operated a modest crocodile farm for nearly 15 years, maintaining approximately 60 animals across 3 concrete enclosures. His operation supplied juvenile crocodiles to larger facilities, while occasionally harvesting adults for leather. Wichai had learned crocodile husbandry from his father, who had established the farm in the 1980s during Thailand's crocodile farming boom. The farm's layout was functional but minimal. 3 rectangular concrete pits, each measuring approximately 40 feet by 20 feet, held the crocodiles in conditions crowded enough to require careful monitoring for aggression. Raised wooden walkways provided access for feeding and maintenance, while a small office building housed butchering equipment and refrigeration. The facility operated without formal accreditation and had never been inspected by wildlife authorities. Security cameras had been installed 6 months earlier after a series of nighttime thefts from nearby farms. The system consisted of 4 cameras covering the enclosures and entrance areas, recording continuously to a digital storage unit in the office. The footage would later become the only comprehensive record of what transpired that morning. Wichai's daily routine began at 6 a.m. with feeding, when the crocodiles were most active and responsive. He worked alone most mornings, as his 2 part-time employees arrived later to handle cleaning and maintenance tasks. The feeding process involved tossing whole fish and chicken parts into the enclosures from the wooden walkways, a method that minimized direct contact while still requiring the handler to lean over the edge to ensure even food distribution. Most of the crocodiles in the pit were farm-bred stock, but the dominant animal was different. A larger saltwater specimen Wichai had acquired secondhand, because few small farms could safely manage a crocodile at the upper end of the size range. Wichai estimated the male at over 13 feet and roughly 900 pounds, and he'd had it for nearly 8 years, after taking it off the hands of an operation that couldn't keep it contained. Even in a crowded enclosure, the big male held the best position near the feeding edge and routinely displayed dominance. Jaw gaping, tail slaps, and short charges that forced smaller animals to give way. In crowded commercial enclosures, feeding time creates intense competition. Crocodiles conditioned to regular food delivery often rush toward movement along the enclosure edge, especially when a handler leans into the strike zone. Over time, habituation to human presence reduces avoidance behavior without diminishing predatory capability, creating animals that approach rather than retreat during feeding. Wichai had completed feeding the 2 smaller enclosures and was working his way along the walkway beside the largest pit, tossing fish to the crocodiles below. The security camera footage shows him leaning forward over the railing, his upper body extending approximately 3 feet beyond the walkway's edge as he attempted to throw food toward the far corner of the enclosure. The large male had been resting near the walkway's support posts, partially concealed by the angle of the concrete wall. As Wichai leaned forward, the crocodile lunged upward with explosive force, its massive jaws clearing the walkway's edge and clamping onto Wichai's left upper arm near the shoulder, as his forward-leaning posture drove his torso hard against the concrete edge. The bite crushed his collarbone instantly, the teeth penetrating deep into his chest cavity and puncturing his left lung. The crocodile's momentum pulled Wichai forward, his legs lifting off the walkway as his upper body was dragged over the railing. He fell approximately 6 feet, landing partially in the water while the crocodile maintained its grip. The death roll began immediately. The massive reptile twisted its body violently, spinning Wichai through the water in rapid rotations that disoriented him completely while causing catastrophic tissue damage. The security footage captured the churning water and the brief moments when Wichai's face broke the surface, his expression frozen in shock and agony. After several seconds of violent rolling, disrupted by the confined space and movement of other animals in the pit, the crocodile released its initial grip and repositioned, its jaws now clamping onto Wichai's head and neck. The crushing pressure collapsed his neck and airway, cutting off breathing and causing rapid, fatal blood loss. Consciousness fled within seconds as blood loss and head trauma overwhelmed his system. The other crocodiles in the enclosure began moving toward the commotion, drawn by the thrashing and the blood spreading through the water. Other crocodiles moved toward the disturbance as the dominant male maintained control near the body, with additional biting occurring amid jostling movement as the water churned. The first employee arrived at the farm approximately 45 minutes later, immediately noticing the empty bucket on the walkway and the disturbed water in the large enclosure. Security footage was reviewed, confirming the attack sequence. Police and rescue personnel arrived within 2 hours, but recovery of Witch Eye's remains proved extremely difficult, with 15 aggressive crocodiles defending their enclosure. Wildlife authorities secured the perimeter and used a slow, methodical process to regain control of the pit, using makeshift shields along the pit edge, throwing bait to draw the cluster away from the remains, and lowering the water level enough to limit sudden surges, while they kept the dominant male pushed back near the far corner, long enough for recovery hooks to be deployed. Only once the water surface calmed and the animals were held back behind makeshift shields did recovery teams move in to retrieve what remained of Witch Eye's body. The investigation concluded that inadequate safety barriers and working alone had directly contributed to the fatal outcome. The facility was permanently closed, and the surviving crocodiles were transferred to larger operations with stricter containment and staffing rules. It was February 27, 2018, in the vast wilderness of Everglades National Park, Florida, where over 1.5 million acres of subtropical wetlands create one of America's most dangerous ecosystems. This UNESCO World Heritage Site encompasses sawgrass marshes, cypress swamps, and mangrove forests that serve as home to one of North America's most formidable predators. Clara Dale, a 52-year-old high school biology teacher from Miami, had dedicated her career to inspiring students through hands-on learning experiences. As a cautious educator who always prioritized student safety, Clara planned to scout locations for an upcoming field trip that would allow her advanced biology students to observe wetland ecosystems firsthand. Clara had chosen to visit during late February because she believed cooler winter temperatures would make wildlife less active and safer for student observation. However, her timing coincided with the early mating season, a period when American alligators become more territorial and unpredictable due to heightened hormonal activity. The specific area Clara selected featured elevated wooden boardwalks that allowed visitors to observe wildlife while maintaining safe distances from the water. These boardwalks had been constructed by the National Park Service to prevent dangerous encounters between visitors and the park's numerous alligators. The American alligator represents one of North America's most successful conservation stories, having recovered from near extinction to current populations exceeding 1 million individuals. Adult females typically reach lengths of 8 to 9 feet and can weigh between 154 and 198 pounds. During the mating season, female alligators aggressively defend preferred territory and may attack perceived intruders without warning. Unlike crocodiles, American alligators are generally less aggressive toward humans and rarely initiate unprovoked attacks. However, during nesting season, their behavior changes dramatically as maternal instincts override their typical avoidance of human contact. American alligators possess powerful jaws, capable of delivering bite forces exceeding 2,125 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush turtle shells and break bones instantly. On that fateful morning, Clara walked along the designated wooden boardwalk, taking detailed notes about sight lines, safety barriers, and potential educational opportunities. She carried a waterproof notebook and camera to document various species she observed. As Clara reached a section overlooking a particularly scenic marsh area, she noticed that recent flooding had submerged parts of the marsh just beyond the boardwalk. Believing the shallow water would allow closer ecological observation, she made the fatal decision to step off the designated boardwalk at a low, unrailed section and wade into knee-deep water. Unknown to Clara, she had entered the territory of an 8-foot female American alligator that had recently selected this area as her nesting site. The female had been resting motionless among the vegetation, perfectly camouflaged and virtually invisible. Clara's movement into the water triggered the alligator's protective instincts. The alligator surged through the shallow water with explosive speed, closing the distance to Clara in seconds. The attack came without warning as the massive reptile launched herself from the water with tremendous force. Powerful jaws clamped down on Clara's lower left leg just below the knee, crushing bone and shredding muscle. The initial bite force compressed Clara's leg bones into fragments, while the alligator's conical teeth penetrated deep into the surrounding muscle tissue. The crushing pressure severed major blood vessels in her lower leg, causing immediate and severe bleeding that turned the marsh water red. The alligator immediately began a violent thrashing motion, shaking her massive head from side to side while maintaining her grip on Clara's leg. This thrashing technique tore Clara's leg muscles and tendons while simultaneously pulling her off balance and into deeper water. As Clara lost her balance during the thrashing attack, she fell backward, her head striking submerged debris as she was pulled off balance. The impact fractured her skull at the temporal bone, causing immediate brain trauma and loss of consciousness. Blood from the head wound mixed with the water as Clara's body went limp. The alligator continued the attack, dragging Clara's unconscious body into deeper water, where sustained submersion ensured drowning. Clara's damaged lungs filled with water as the alligator maintained her grip, ensuring that drowning completed what the physical trauma had begun. Park visitors discovered Clara's abandoned rental car when she failed to return by evening. Her detailed field notebook, found on the boardwalk near the attack site, helped investigators reconstruct the events. Authorities launched an investigation into the incident. Clara's death shocked the community and prompted discussions about the risks associated with field trip planning in natural environments. Her family established a scholarship fund in her memory to support students pursuing careers in environmental education. It was July 15, 2016, when the remote waterways of Kakadu National Park in Australia's Northern Territory claimed the life of an experienced fishing guide. The ancient landscape, carved by countless wet seasons, had transformed into a maze of shrinking channels and concentrated wildlife during the early dry season. Mangrove-lined creeks snaked through the floodplains, their murky waters hiding both prized barramundi and apex predators that had ruled these waters for millions of years. The morning air hung thick with humidity as the sun began its relentless climb over the wilderness. Delilah Flynn, a 34-year-old professional fishing guide, had built her reputation over 12 years by accessing remote locations that other guides considered too risky. Her clients paid premium rates for her willingness to venture into untouched waters where trophy fish congregated. That morning, Flynn had chosen a particularly isolated mangrove channel, known for holding large barramundi during the dry season. Recent ranger advisories had warned of increased crocodile activity in the area, as receding waters forced the reptiles into smaller, concentrated pools. Her colleagues had expressed concern about her increasingly bold choices of fishing locations, but Flynn's confidence in her abilities had only grown with each successful expedition. She had dismissed the warnings as overly cautious, believing her experience would keep her safe. The saltwater crocodile is Australia's largest living reptile and one of the world's most formidable predators. These ancient hunters commonly reach lengths of 4 to 5 meters, with exceptionally large males growing even longer, and possess one of the most powerful bite forces ever measured in a living animal. During the dry season, they concentrate in remaining water bodies, becoming more territorial and aggressive as competition for space intensifies. Their hunting strategy relies on perfect camouflage and explosive ambush attacks, often remaining motionless for hours before striking with lightning speed. These apex predators descend from a lineage that has survived for over 200 million years, with modern crocodiles retaining many highly effective ancestral traits. Shortly before 6 a.m., Flynn stepped off the muddy bank and waded several meters into the mangrove channel, leaving her safety equipment behind to reduce noise as she fished. She cast her line toward a fallen log where barramundi typically fed in the early morning hours. Beneath the surface, a 4.2-meter saltwater crocodile lay among floating debris, virtually invisible in the murky water, waiting for any disturbance. Flynn's movement through the water created vibrations that the crocodile's sensitive pressure receptors immediately detected. The attack came without warning from Flynn's left side. The crocodile's massive jaws clamped around her torso just below the ribcage, the crushing force immediately fracturing several ribs and inflicting catastrophic internal injuries. The crocodile lunged and clamped onto her, dragging her beneath the surface before beginning its signature death roll. Submerged and unable to resist, her body was spun through 3 complete rotations as the animal twisted violently. The force of the maneuver inflicted catastrophic spinal trauma, paralyzing her lower body almost instantly. Blood spread through the water as the crocodile's teeth drove deeper with each rotation. The crocodile maintained its grip while dragging Flynn toward deeper water near the channel bend. Her attempts to strike the animal's eyes proved futile as the crushing pressure on her chest prevented effective movement. The combination of the punctured lung, spinal injury, and submersion quickly overwhelmed her body's ability to function. Within roughly a minute underwater, Flynn lost consciousness from oxygen deprivation. The crocodile continued to hold her submerged until all movement ceased, ensuring no possibility of survival. The predator's instincts drove it to secure its prey completely before releasing its grip. Park rangers discovered Flynn's abandoned equipment on the shoreline later that morning when she failed to return. An extensive search later located her body in deeper water near the channel, after the crocodile had abandoned the remains. The investigation concluded that she had violated multiple safety protocols by entering known crocodile habitat alone during peak activity hours. Her death prompted renewed calls for stricter enforcement of safety guidelines in Kakadou's waterways. Flynn's family established a memorial fund promoting crocodile safety education for outdoor professionals. The local tourism industry implemented additional safety briefings following the incident. It was August 19, 2014, at the Daly River crossing in Australia's Northern Territory, where a routine school stop ended in a fatal crocodile attack. In the muddy shallows near the bank, students had been rinsing dirt from their shoes when a backpack slipped into the water. A substitute teacher stepped in to retrieve it and did not return. A saltwater crocodile, concealed in the turbid edge of a river long marked as high risk, struck without warning. Davin Rohn had been working as a substitute teacher around Catherine for 2 years, building a reputation for reliability and calm classroom control. At 34, he regularly covered classes on short notice, often stepping into unfamiliar routines with minimal preparation. His background included outdoor education coursework and prior supervision of school excursions, primarily in fenced reserves and managed parkland, rather than unfenced tropical river crossings in known saltwater crocodile habitat. The excursion to the Daly River crossing had been scheduled by the regular classroom teacher, who called in sick the morning of the trip. Davin was left supervising a mixed-age group of 23 students with a single volunteer parent chaperone. The lesson plan focused on river ecosystems and water flow, and the route included a rural crossing that locals sometimes used during the dry season. This seasonal use had normalized the location, despite permanent crocodile warning signage, which authorities in northern Australia maintain year-round, because saltwater crocodiles occupy rivers in both wet and dry seasons. The Daly River system supports a stable population of large saltwater crocodiles, sustained by deep channels, undercut banks, and abundant prey. Adult males commonly exceed 14 to 17 feet in length, with some documented above that range. Their ambush strategy relies on remaining submerged along eroded banks or drop-offs, launching forward with explosive acceleration powered by the tail. Attacks typically involve a single high-force bite followed by immediate submersion, reducing surface movement and limiting resistance. As the bus stopped near the crossing, Davin directed students to remain clustered away from the waterline. Several children complained about thick mud caked onto their shoes from the walk. One suggested rinsing them in the shallows. The volunteer chaperone was occupied managing permission slips and handing out snacks. With the class spread across uneven ground, Davin focused on maintaining visual control of the group rather than scanning the water surface and bank edges. After a brief pause, Davin allowed a limited shoe rinse near the edge, repeating instructions for everyone to stay clear of deeper water. Students clustered along the bank, some crouching to splash mud from their sneakers. Davin stood slightly ahead of the group, closest to the drop-off, placing himself between the students and the darker channel water. A backpack resting on a flat rock shifted when a student nudged it with a foot. The rock tilted, and the bag slid down the muddy slope, splashing into ankle to shin-deep water near a section where the bank had eroded. That stretch formed a shallow shelf that ended abruptly in a deeper cut carved by seasonal flow. The water there changed color from light brown to a darker tone within a few feet. Davin stepped forward immediately, moving past the shelf to grab the floating strap before it drifted farther out. As he leaned toward the bag, his boots sank slightly into soft mud. One foot crossed the subtle lip where the shelf dropped into deeper water. The surface remained calm. A thin layer of sediment drifted near the edge. Saltwater crocodiles are known to hold position along banks with only their eyes and nostrils above water, often aligning with shadows and overhanging roots to break up their outline. Its body lay angled parallel to the shore, concealed by murky water and the overhang of roots. Rangers later estimated the crocodile measured approximately 15 to 16 feet long. That estimate was based on slide marks pressed into the mud, the width of tracks left on the bank, and the spacing between puncture wounds documented during recovery. At the moment of contact, it produced no warning display. There was no tail slap or hiss. The water did not churn beforehand. The strike followed the pattern documented in riverbank ambushes, where movement at the edge triggers a short, direct lunge. The crocodile surged forward in a straight-line burst that lasted only seconds, a movement later reconstructed by wildlife officers using track displacement in the mud and the measured strike distance from the water's edge. Its head lifted just enough to clear the eroded bank before its jaws closed around Davin's upper thigh and hip. Several witnesses described hearing a sharp, cracking snap, separate from the splash, consistent with heavy jaws clamping onto bone and muscle. The initial impact pulled Davin off his planted foot instantly. His hands shot toward the bank, fingers digging into mud and sparse grass, but the rain-soaked soil tore away in clumps as his weight shifted forward. As the crocodile locked its grip, its tail swept powerfully from side to side beneath the surface. Investigators later noted that this lateral sweep likely generated the thrust needed to drag both bodies off the shallow shelf and into deeper water. Davin's lower body was pulled ahead while his torso twisted sharply, forcing his spine into an unnatural angle. One arm struck the surface hard enough to spray water outward before disappearing. Witnesses several yards back said that was the last clear human movement they saw before the water closed over him. Within seconds of the bite, the crocodile initiated a tight rotational movement commonly referred to as a death roll. The motion was compact rather than extended, consistent with attacks intended to incapacitate rather than dismember. Witnesses described the water erupting in a short, violent churn, with both bodies turning beneath the surface in a confined arc. Sediment and debris were forced upward almost immediately, collapsing visibility. Based on the brief duration of surface disturbance, investigators concluded the rotation involved only a few revolutions before full submersion. Medical assessment later determined that the initial bite pattern was consistent with fractures to the upper femur, or disruption of the pelvic ring. Crushing force in that region can tear surrounding muscle, compromise major blood vessels, and cause rapid internal and external bleeding. Such injuries are known to result in immediate loss of coordinated movement. Sudden submersion into deeper water further reduced any ability to resist or orient. There was no prolonged struggle visible at the surface, a detail noted independently by multiple witnesses. The water clouded rapidly as sediment from the riverbed rose in thick plumes, turning the area opaque within seconds. The crocodile maintained its grip and angled downward toward the deeper channel adjacent to the crossing. Wildlife officers later stated that this behavior aligns with documented saltwater crocodile attacks, in which prey is pulled below the surface and held under using body mass and jaw pressure to prevent resurfacing before repositioning. Approximately 20 seconds after the strike, surface disturbance diminished. The water flattened, leaving only faint ripples spreading outward from the point of entry. The backpack floated briefly where it had fallen, drifting slowly toward the darker channel before tipping and partially submerging. No further movement was observed at the surface. Students stepped back and ran toward the bus parked uphill. The parent chaperone shouted for everyone to move away from the edge and immediately dialed emergency services. Another adult who had remained near the bus gathered the students, directing them farther from the riverbank and conducting a head count. The river surface remained still. No further movement was visible. The channel returned to its earlier calm appearance, broken only by floating debris and the slow current moving past the eroded bank. Due to the remote location, police and wildlife rangers arrived approximately 40 minutes later, a response time consistent with rural Northern Territory distances. Officers assessed the bank for slide marks and entry points before specialized personnel entered the water from a boat positioned away from the original strike area. Operations were slowed by current, fading daylight, and confirmed crocodile activity in the vicinity. Davin's body was recovered later that evening from deeper water downstream of the crossing. Examination documented crushing trauma to the pelvis and upper leg consistent with a large crocodile bite, along with water in the airways consistent with drowning. Identification was confirmed through clothing and personal items. The crocodile involved was not captured, which is not uncommon in open river systems where multiple large animals are present. In the weeks that followed, the school district issued directives prohibiting excursions near unfenced waterways without region-specific wildlife safety training and formal risk assessment. These changes were distributed through administrative channels. Media coverage remained local and brief. The coroner's findings listed fatal blunt force trauma due to crocodile attack with associated drowning as the cause of death, noting that incapacitation would have occurred rapidly following the initial bite and submersion. It was September 13, 2018. Seasonal flooding had covered a section of remote road in northern Australia, turning a route Caleb Morris had driven many times into something he had never encountered before. The water appeared calm and shallow from the road's edge, reflecting the beam of his headlights without revealing anything beneath. No other vehicles. No other people. The detour would add over an hour. Caleb Morris was 24 years old and had grown up in the region. He knew this road in dry conditions. He did not fully know what it was in the dark under a foot of floodwater. He stepped out of the vehicle, left the headlights on, and waded in to check the depth before deciding whether to drive through. It was a practical decision, made quickly, the kind made on empty roads at night when the alternative feels disproportionate to the apparent obstacle. He had driven that road before. Flooded roadways in northern Australia's wet season are among the highest risk environments for saltwater crocodile encounters. The animals patrol floodplains actively during wet season, using temporary waterways to access new territory and concentrate near predictable crossing points, locations where prey is channeled into the water by the terrain. They return to the same crossings across multiple seasons. A particular animal may use the same flooded low point on a particular road every wet season for years. They are primarily nocturnal, more active after dark, and their pressure-sensing systems operate effectively in conditions where human visibility is near zero. The darkness that prevents a person from seeing anything below the surface has no equivalent effect on an animal that does not hunt by sight. The water that looks calm and passable from the road's edge is the same water the crocodile has been motionless in since before the flooding began, positioned, waiting, tracking anything that enters. A person wading across that water at night is not crossing a flooded road. They are walking into an ambush that was set before they arrived. Caleb waded in. The bottom was firm, packed dirt, which gave him confidence. The water rose to mid-calf, then his knees as he moved toward the center. He swept his phone light across the surface. It reflected nothing useful back, just the flat glare of light off dark water, the same in every direction. He could not see the bottom. He could not see more than a few inches beneath the surface. What he could see looked like nothing. The crossing appeared manageable. He took another step forward and then another. The water was at mid-thigh now. The far bank was visible in the headlights. The road surface on the other side was dry. He was roughly halfway across. The crocodile had been positioned approximately 25 feet to his right, submerged in less than 3 feet of water. It had moved into the flooded area earlier that evening following rising water from a nearby creek and had been motionless long enough that the water around it had returned to complete stillness. No ripple, no disturbance, no indication on the surface that something measuring over 12 feet was lying between him and the far bank. It registered Caleb's entry the moment his foot broke the surface and tracked him continuously as he waded forward. The phone light swept across the water and illuminated nothing recognizable. The crocodile did not move until the distance closed to within strike range. At that point, it did not hesitate. The attack came from behind. The crocodile covered the gap in under 3 seconds. No sound, no surface movement, no warning of any kind. The jaws closed around his midsection from behind, compressing his torso and penetrating deep into the back and abdomen. The thoracic cavity sustained immediate structural damage, ribs fractured under the initial compression, the tissue beneath driven inward. The bite force of a large saltwater crocodile exceeds 2,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone on first contact. The force of the impact launched him forward off his feet. His phone spun out of his hand, its light briefly visible before hitting the water and going dark. The pressure on his torso prevented his lungs from fully expanding. He could not draw a full breath. Whatever sound he managed, a gasp, a partial cry, was cut off before it carried. There was nothing on the road behind him. No one to hear it. The water was dark and the headlights illuminated the surface and nothing beneath it. The crocodile pulled him backward and down. He went under immediately. He surfaced once, his arms reaching upward with nothing to find. No bank, no bottom, no shallow ground within reach, and went under again as the animal moved toward deeper water at the roadway's edge. The animal initiated a death roll, spinning rapidly along its axis and rotating his body with it. The thoracic injuries compounded under the mechanical force of the rotation. Water entered his airway. His lungs, already unable to expand fully, began taking in fluid. The blood loss from the bite combined with the oxygen deprivation to accelerate the collapse faster than either would have alone. His arms stopped reaching. His body stopped resisting. Within 2 minutes, he lost consciousness. Within 3 to 4, he was gone. The water above him returned to stillness. The headlights from his vehicle, still burning at the road's edge 130 feet away, illuminated the surface of the crossing without revealing anything beneath it. There was nothing on the surface to see. There never had been. When he failed to arrive, family contacted authorities. Rangers found the vehicle at first light. Headlights on, engine running, door open, exactly as he had left it. The footprints in the packed dirt at the road's edge led into the water and did not come back. His body was located 260 feet from the road, submerged in 4 feet of water, 8 hours after the attack. The injuries were consistent with a large saltwater crocodile and evidence of a death roll. Drowning was listed as the primary cause of death, with thoracic trauma as a contributing factor. A crocodile measuring 12 feet, 9 inches, was captured 300 feet from the site 3 days later and euthanized. The road crossing was reclassified as a high-risk wet season site and posted with explicit crocodile warnings at both ends. The only thing the scene could not account for was that interval, 30 seconds at most, between when he stepped off the road's edge and when the water closed over him. And that interval, like the animal responsible for it, was never recovered. It was August 9th, 2016, deep within the Amazon River basin of Brazil, where the world's largest tropical rainforest creates an intricate network of waterways and flooded forests. This remote region represents one of Earth's most biodiverse ecosystems, where murky waters conceal countless species. During the wet season, rising water levels create perfect hunting conditions for the Amazon's apex aquatic predator. Owen Stark, a 36-year-old experienced fishing guide from Manaus, had spent 15 years navigating the treacherous waters of the Amazon basin, leading wealthy tourists to remote locations where trophy-sized fish could be found. His confident personality had earned him a reputation as one of the most knowledgeable guides in the region. Owen was traveling alone in his small motorboat to scout new fishing locations for an upcoming group of high-paying American clients who had requested access to virgin waters where large peacock bass remained abundant. His solo reconnaissance missions were legendary among local guides, as Owen would venture into areas considered too dangerous by others. Owen had chosen to explore a narrow tributary deep in the Mamarawa Sustainable Development Reserve, an area known for its pristine ecosystem and minimal human presence. The timing of his expedition coincided with the peak of the wet season, when rising water levels brought large predators into the flooded forest areas. The black caiman represents South America's largest crocodilian and one of the most formidable aquatic predators in the Amazon basin. Adult males can reach lengths exceeding 13 to 16 feet and weigh over 881 pounds, making them significantly larger and more dangerous than their smaller caiman relatives. These prehistoric apex predators possess immense, bone-crushing bite force capable of killing large mammals. Black caimans are primarily nocturnal hunters that rely on stealth, patience, and explosive power to capture prey. Their dark coloration provides perfect camouflage in the tannin-stained waters of the Amazon, making them virtually invisible to potential victims. Unlike smaller caiman species, black caimans actively hunt large mammals and have been known to attack humans. These massive reptiles employ sophisticated hunting strategies, often positioning themselves near riverbanks where mammals come to drink. Their powerful tails allow them to accelerate explosively through water over short distances. As afternoon set in, Owen's reliable outboard motor began experiencing mechanical problems as he navigated through a particularly narrow section of the tributary. The engine sputtered and died completely, leaving him stranded where a strong current was carrying his disabled boat toward dangerous rapids downstream. With no radio contact possible and darkness approaching rapidly, Owen faced a critical decision. As the current began pulling his disabled boat toward submerged debris and rapids, Owen made the desperate decision to abandon the vessel and swim toward the nearest visible riverbank. The murky water concealed the true depth, and Owen was unaware that he was entering the hunting territory of a massive 13-feet male black caiman. Owen entered the water during peak hunting period for nocturnal black caimans, just as daylight was fading. The massive caiman had been resting motionless near a submerged log, using its perfect camouflage to remain undetected while waiting for prey. As Owen began swimming toward shore, his movement created vibrations that immediately alerted the black caiman to his presence. The enormous predator approached silently from behind, using stealth hunting techniques perfected over millions of years. Owen remained completely unaware of the danger approaching beneath the dark water. The black caiman struck from behind, its massive jaws clamping down on Owen's leg and yanking him violently beneath the surface. The initial bite tore into muscle and bone, locking him in place as the caiman dragged him underwater. The immense bite force fractured ribs and crushed muscle, triggering massive internal bleeding and immediate respiratory collapse. The caiman immediately initiated a violent death roll, spinning its massive body while maintaining its grip on Owen's torso. This signature technique generated tremendous torque that tore tissue and kept him submerged, eliminating any chance of escape. The rolling motion also tore his internal organs apart, causing catastrophic internal bleeding. During the death roll, Owen's body was dragged fully underwater as the caiman continued its spinning motion. The combination of massive trauma, paralysis, and drowning ensured death occurred rapidly. The black caiman dragged Owen's body deeper into the flooded forest, where it was never recovered. The massive predator then retreated to its underwater lair. Search teams discovered Owen's abandoned motorboat 3 days later, caught in fallen trees approximately 200 meters downstream from the attack site. Environmental authorities launched an extensive search operation involving multiple boats and experienced local guides, but Owen's body was never recovered. The investigation revealed that Owen had violated several safety protocols by traveling alone into known black caiman territory without proper communication equipment. His death highlighted the extreme dangers faced by those who venture into the Amazon's most remote areas. Owen's family established a foundation to promote safety education for Amazon guides and tourists, emphasizing the importance of proper equipment when exploring remote waterways. It was July 19, 2017, and the humid air of Borneo's coastal mangroves carried the constant buzz of insects and the distant calls of proboscis monkeys. The dense forest formed part of a protected ecosystem, but illegal logging operations had been steadily stripping valuable timber from increasingly remote areas. These operations required crews to move on foot through tangled vegetation, scouting viable trees and clearing access paths before felling could begin. Wiranto Kusuma was a 41-year-old foreman who had been involved in illegal logging operations for nearly 8 years. The Malaysian syndicate that employed him paid far better than legitimate work, and Wiranto had developed extensive experience navigating the dense mangrove interior that made these isolated locations accessible. His crew consisted of 7 men tasked with identifying high-value hardwoods and coordinating extraction routes through the forest. The operation had been active at this location for 5 days, extracting dozens of valuable hardwood logs worth tens of thousands of dollars. Wiranto's role required him to scout ahead of the crew on foot, marking trees and flagging paths through terrain that shifted between firm ground, muddy flats, and dense undergrowth depending on the tidal cycle. His familiarity with the mangroves had bred a casualness around the environment that legitimate operators would never tolerate. That afternoon, Wiranto moved ahead of the crew along a narrow trail roughly 60 yards inland from the main tidal channel. The ground was soft and uneven, thick with decomposing vegetation and tangled root systems. He was marking a route toward a cluster of hardwoods when he noticed a large mound of mud and rotting plant matter rising roughly 2 feet above the forest floor in a small clearing near the water's edge. The mound was approximately 5 feet across, its surface packed with layers of leaves, sticks, and damp soil. Wiranto paused, unfamiliar with the structure. He stepped closer, curious about the obstruction and whether it would need to be cleared for the extraction path. He circled the mound, prodding it with his boot, and noticed warmth radiating from beneath the packed vegetation. He crouched down and began pulling away handfuls of debris, exposing a clutch of pale, leathery eggs partially buried in the decomposing material. The surrounding mud bore faint drag marks leading toward the tidal channel, evidence of repeated movement between water and nest over previous days. Female crocodiles often alternate between submerged rest and land-based vigilance during incubation, adjusting position according to temperature and tidal fluctuation. The afternoon tide had recently receded, leaving the nest exposed and the forest floor damp but navigable. Mature saltwater crocodile females typically reach 10 to 13 feet in length and weigh between 300 and 450 pounds. During nesting season, females construct large mounds of vegetation near water sources, relying on decomposition heat to incubate clutches of 40 to 60 eggs over roughly 90 days. Nesting females are among the most dangerous crocodiles encountered on land, remaining concealed near the nest at all times and responding to any disturbance with immediate aggressive defense. Unlike predatory ambush attacks, nest defense charges are direct and sustained, with the female committed to eliminating the perceived threat rather than retreating. A female crocodile, roughly 12 feet in length, had been resting in a shallow depression, less than 10 feet from the nest mound, her dark body hidden beneath a layer of fallen leaves and mud. She had remained motionless as Waranto approached, but the moment his hands disturbed the nest material and exposed the eggs, the animal launched. The crocodile charged from concealment with explosive speed, covering the short distance before Waranto could stand. Her jaws clamped around his right forearm as he instinctively raised it to shield himself, the interlocking teeth driving through muscle and snapping both bones below the elbow. The force of the impact knocked him backward over the nest mound, and the crocodile followed without releasing, dragging him off the far side. Two crew members working approximately 40 yards behind heard Waranto's screams and ran toward the clearing. They arrived in time to see the crocodile thrashing violently, her powerful neck wrenching side to side while maintaining her grip on his arm. Waranto kicked and twisted on the ground, but the animal's weight pinned him as her jaws released his shattered forearm and struck again, clamping across his throat and upper chest. Crushing force collapsed his windpipe and severed major blood vessels. His struggles weakened rapidly. The crew members shouted and threw debris, but the crocodile held her position over Waranto's body for several moments before releasing and retreating toward the water, positioning herself between the men and her nest. Waranto lay motionless in the clearing, blood pooling into the soft ground beneath him. He had lost consciousness within seconds of the second bite and died from catastrophic blood loss and airway destruction before the crew could reach him. The crew carried Waranto's body back to the logging camp, where panicked discussions followed over how to report the death without exposing the illegal operation. By the following morning, fear of criminal charges for failing to report outweighed concerns about the logging itself. One crew member traveled to the nearest village with communication capabilities and alerted authorities. Indonesian wildlife officers arrived later that day alongside police investigators. The illegal logging operation was immediately evident, with freshly cut timber, tools, and transport equipment scattered throughout the protected area. Officers located the nest site and confirmed it as an active crocodile nesting mound, consistent with defensive attack behavior. The investigation led to criminal charges against syndicate leaders, arrests of several participants, and increased enforcement patrols throughout the region. It was July 9, 2017 at Sundara Cove Resort, an upscale property located along the southern coast of Bali near Nusa Dua. The resort featured multiple swimming pools, direct beach access, and carefully maintained tropical landscaping designed to create an atmosphere of paradise. Among the property's amenities were two large decorative ponds stocked with koi fish and surrounded by lush vegetation, intended as scenic focal points for guests. Marcus Chen was a 34-year-old software engineer from San Francisco who had arrived at the resort 3 days earlier with his wife, Rebecca, for a delayed honeymoon. The couple had spent their days exploring temples, beaches, and local markets before returning each evening to the resort's amenities. Marcus had a habit of morning exercise, typically swimming laps in the main pool before breakfast. The morning was warm and humid, with temperatures already reaching 82 degrees Fahrenheit by 6:30 a.m. when Marcus left his room. The main pool area was being cleaned, prompting Marcus to explore alternative locations for his morning routine. He noticed the larger of the two decorative ponds near the resort's eastern gardens, a body of water measuring approximately 60 feet long and 30 feet wide, with a maximum depth of around 5 feet. The pond's purpose was purely ornamental, with resort management having posted small signs indicating it was not for swimming. However, the signs were discreet and easily overlooked, written in Indonesian with smaller English translations underneath. The pond's clear water and inviting appearance gave no indication of danger. What Marcus could not have known was that a juvenile saltwater crocodile, measuring approximately 4 to 5 feet in length, had entered the pond only days earlier through a drainage canal connected to a nearby mangrove estuary during high tide, becoming trapped when water levels dropped. Resort staff had not yet discovered its presence, as the crocodile remained hidden among dense water plants during daylight hours. Security cameras positioned to monitor the garden pathways had partial views of the pond area, though the angles were designed to observe walkways rather than water features. The footage would later show portions of what transpired, though significant portions of the attack occurred outside the camera's fields of view. What the cameras did capture, Marcus stepping into the pond, the sudden burst of thrashing near the center, and staff sprinting in with poles, matched the later phone video taken during the recovery, creating a grim, stitched-together timeline of the incident. Marcus entered the water at approximately 6:45 a.m., wading in from the shallow end near a decorative waterfall feature. The water appeared clear near the surface, though plant beds and shadowed areas toward the deeper end obscured visibility below. He began swimming slow laps across the pond's length, his strokes steady and relaxed as he enjoyed the quiet morning. Juvenile saltwater crocodiles, despite their smaller size, are fully capable of inflicting fatal injuries. Even younger animals can inflict deep punctures and tearing wounds, and their ambush instincts mirror those of larger adults. The crocodile had been resting among water plants near the pond's deep end, its presence completely undetected by Marcus as he swam. When Marcus's third lap brought him within striking range, the juvenile launched its attack. The crocodile surged forward and clamped onto Marcus's right lower leg just below the knee, its teeth punching through skin and muscle as it thrashed sideways in the shallow water. The force wasn't a clean snap so much as a violent wrench, enough to tear tissue and open fast-bleeding wounds while yanking him off balance. Marcus screamed as he went under, swallowing water as his hands clawed for the surface. The struggle was violent and disorienting, more thrashing than a clean, powerful roll, as Marcus kicked and the crocodile wrenched side to side in the shallow water. Each surge tore at the wound and pulled him under again, and the panic of fighting for air set in almost immediately. After a few seconds, the crocodile released its grip momentarily, leaving Marcus scrambling for the surface, coughing and gasping, one leg kicking weakly as blood feathered behind him. He tried to half swim, half crawl toward the edge using only his arms, but the crocodile surged again, this time catching higher on the thigh in a quick clamp and pull. The second strike dragged him under in a short, frantic struggle, and the combination of blood loss, panic, and repeated submersion began to shut his body down. A resort gardener arriving for his morning shift heard the splashing and screaming from approximately 100 yards away. He ran toward the pond, arriving to see Marcus floating face down near the center, the water around him dark with blood. The crocodile surfaced briefly 15 feet away before submerging again. The gardener immediately radioed resort security while running toward the maintenance building to retrieve a long pole. 2 security guards arrived within 3 minutes, one filming on his mobile phone as they attempted to determine how to safely extract Marcus from the water. Staff hesitated, fully aware that entering the water would likely draw the animal back toward them. They kept a distance behind landscaping barriers, using long maintenance poles and loud noise to track the crocodile's position before attempting any recovery. Additional staff arrived with ropes and poles, eventually managing to hook Marcus's body and pull it toward the shallow end while keeping the poles between themselves and the water. He was pulled from the pond approximately 9 minutes after the initial attack, after the crocodile disengaged and remained submerged near the far end. His right lower leg and left thigh showed deep puncture and tear wounds with heavy bleeding, and his skin had already taken on the gray, drained look of a drowning victim. The injuries were severe, but it was the repeated submersion, combined with rapid blood loss, that proved fatal. Resort medical staff began emergency treatment immediately, applying tourniquets to both legs while waiting for ambulance transport. Marcus had lost consciousness and showed no pulse. Despite aggressive CPR efforts, he could not be resuscitated. The combination of massive blood loss, drowning, and traumatic shock had proven fatal. Indonesian wildlife authorities arrived later that morning and successfully captured the juvenile crocodile using baited traps. Investigation revealed the drainage canal connection that had allowed the animal to enter the property. The resort implemented immediate modifications to prevent future wildlife access and installed prominent multilingual warning signs around all water features. It was November 18, 2015, in the remote wilderness of Kruger National Park, South Africa, where the Crocodile River winds through one of Africa's most pristine ecosystems. This legendary waterway serves as a natural boundary and vital water source for countless species. During the dry season, the river becomes a concentrated hunting ground where Africa's most dangerous predators converge. Nolan Grant, a 41-year-old unemployed mechanic from Johannesburg, had fallen on desperate times following the closure of his automotive repair shop. With mounting debts and no legitimate income prospects, Nolan had reluctantly turned to illegal wildlife poaching as a means of survival. His reckless, greedy personality made him willing to take extreme risks that experienced poachers would never consider. Nolan had partnered with 2 other desperate men, forming a small poaching operation that targeted high-value wildlife within Kruger's protected boundaries. They focused on crocodile hunting because crocodile skin commanded premium prices in the illegal wildlife trade, with large specimens fetching thousands of dollars from buyers in Asia and Europe. The trio had entered the park illegally under cover of darkness. The group had specifically targeted the Crocodile River area because intelligence from other poachers indicated the presence of several large Nile crocodiles spotted basking on riverbanks during daylight hours. Nolan's overconfidence in his hunting abilities, combined with his desperate need for money, had led him to volunteer for the most dangerous part of their operation. The Nile crocodile stands as Africa's apex aquatic predator, a prehistoric survivor that has remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Their massive skulls house jaws capable of delivering bone-crushing force, powerful enough to snap bones instantly. Nile crocodiles are ambush predators that rely on stealth, patience, and explosive power to capture prey. Their hunting strategy involves remaining perfectly motionless for hours, often appearing dead or unconscious to potential victims. When threatened or wounded, these ancient predators become exponentially more dangerous, capable of lightning-fast attacks even when severely injured. When darkness descended, Nolan positioned himself on the muddy riverbank with a high-powered rifle, waiting for the perfect shot at an estimated 15-feet male Nile crocodile that had been spotted earlier. The enormous reptile lay motionless in shallow water near the bank, presenting what appeared to be an ideal target for a clean kill shot. Nolan fired a single shot that struck the crocodile in the shoulder region, causing visible bleeding but failing to reach vital organs due to the animal's thick hide and heavy bone structure. The wounded crocodile immediately retreated into slightly deeper water, where it remained motionless, appearing to be dying from its injuries. Believing the massive reptile was incapacitated and near death, Nolan made the fatal decision to wade into knee-deep water to claim his valuable prize. His two partners remained on the riverbank, ready to help process the crocodile's skin. The murky water and darkness concealed the true condition of the wounded predator. As Nolan reached for the crocodile's tail to drag it toward shore, the massive reptile exploded into action with shocking speed and power. Despite its wound, the crocodile retained full use of its devastating jaws and launched a lightning-fast counterattack. Enormous jaws snapped shut on Nolan's right thigh with crushing force, fracturing the femur and tearing through the femoral artery. The crocodile immediately initiated a violent death roll, spinning its massive body while maintaining its grip on Nolan's leg. The rolling motion generated tremendous torque that twisted and tore the muscles and tendons in his thigh while violently wrenching his lower body out of alignment. The severed femoral artery pumped blood into the water at an alarming rate, causing rapid blood loss and shock. Nolan's screams echoed across the river as the crocodile continued its death roll, each rotation tearing muscle and connective tissue while accelerating blood loss. His two partners panicked and fled toward their vehicle, abandoning him rather than risk their own lives. The rolling motion dragged Nolan into deeper water, where the blood loss quickly robbed him of strength. The massive blood loss from the severed artery caused Nolan to lose consciousness in 4 minutes. The crocodile maintained its grip as it dragged Nolan into deeper water, ensuring that drowning completed what blood loss and shock had begun. Authorities discovered Nolan's abandoned poaching equipment the following morning during a routine patrol. The investigation revealed spent rifle cartridges and blood evidence that told the story of the failed poaching attempt. Park rangers also located the wounded crocodile, which had survived its gunshot injury. The incident sparked renewed efforts by conservation authorities to combat illegal poaching activities within Kruger National Park, while serving as a grim reminder of the dangers faced by those who exploit protected wildlife. Nolan's death received little sympathy from conservation groups. It was March 22, 2017, when the tidal waters of Queensland's Daintree River turned a romantic anniversary celebration into a nightmare. The ancient river system, flowing through one of the world's oldest rainforests, creates a complex network of mangrove-lined channels where freshwater meets the coral sea. During the wet season's end, the river runs high and murky, providing perfect hunting conditions for apex predators. Pearl Walker, a 28-year-old marine biology graduate student, had planned this river excursion as both a romantic gesture and research opportunity. Her academic focus on estuarine ecosystems made her intimately familiar with the Daintree's wildlife, including its substantial crocodile population. Walker also worked part-time as a tour guide, sharing her passion for marine science with visitors. That afternoon, she and her fiancé had launched their small aluminum dinghy to celebrate their engagement anniversary. Walker intended to collect water samples for her university research, while showing her partner the river's unique ecosystem. She had been studying crocodile behavior patterns and felt confident in her ability to predict their movements. Recent observations had revealed a large saltwater crocodile frequenting a particular mud bank along their planned route. Walker had photographed this individual multiple times during previous research trips, documenting its basking behavior and territorial patterns. Saltwater crocodiles are among the world's most successful predators, having survived virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. These massive reptiles can exceed 6 meters in length and possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, measuring over 3,700 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy relies on stealth and explosive power, remaining motionless for hours before launching devastating ambush attacks. During the wet season, increased water levels allow crocodiles greater mobility throughout river systems. Wildlife authorities note that murky floodwaters significantly reduce human visibility while enhancing a crocodile's ability to detect vibration and movement, and they become more territorial as breeding season approaches, defending prime basking sites with increased aggression. At 2:30 p.m., Walker and her fiancé anchored their low-sided dinghy approximately 15 meters from the riverbank. The familiar crocodile lay motionless on its preferred mud bank, appearing to bask in the afternoon sun. Walker began photographing the animal while explaining its behavior to her partner. Confident in her assessment, Walker leaned over the port gunwale to collect water samples for salinity testing. The small boat's low freeboard brought her upper body close to the water's surface as she extended a collection bottle into the river. Unknown to Walker, the crocodile had silently entered the water and approached underwater, using the boat's shadow to mask its movement. The approximately 3.8-meter saltwater crocodile maneuvered alongside the dinghy beneath the surface, using the shadow of the hull to conceal its approach. As Walker stretched further over the side, the crocodile exploded vertically from the water with tremendous force. Its massive jaws clamped across her upper torso and neck, the crushing force fracturing her clavicle and violently wrenching her head against the gunwale. The impact's force pulled her completely from the boat into the murky water. The crocodile immediately submerged, dragging Walker 12 feet to the river bottom. It began its signature death roll, rotating twice while maintaining its devastating grip. The violent spinning motion caused catastrophic cervical spine trauma, severing her spinal cord high in the neck and causing immediate paralysis. The force of the attack caused severe head trauma and extensive internal hemorrhaging. Combined with the catastrophic spinal injuries, these wounds were medically unsurvivable. The crocodile maintained its hold underwater for several minutes, ensuring its prey was fully incapacitated. Walker's fiancé attempted a rescue using the boat's oar, but the crocodile had already disappeared into the river's depths with her body. Authorities recovered Walker's remains 2 days later, during an extensive search operation. The investigation concluded that she had ignored widely publicized safety guidelines by positioning herself too close to the riverbank in known crocodile habitat. Her death prompted renewed warnings about maintaining safe distances from riverbanks. Walker's university established a scholarship in her name for marine biology students, emphasizing field safety education. The local tourism industry implemented stricter guidelines for boat positioning near crocodile territories. It was December 7, 2017, a child's birthday at the edge of the St. Lucia estuary in South Africa's Isimangaliso Wetland Park turned deadly. What began as an afternoon gathering beside brown, slow-moving water ended in less than 2 minutes. A father stepped into the shallows to show that the water was safe. Moments later, a large Nile crocodile struck from deeper water. In front of his family, he was pulled under and did not resurface. The sequence matched documented ambush patterns in that region. Sibuso Ndlovu was 38 years old and had worked for 12 years as a delivery fleet supervisor in Mpangeni. His job required coordination, route planning, and oversight of drivers moving goods across regional highways. Co-workers described him as reliable and organized, someone who handled pressure without raising his voice. Within his extended family, he often took on a similar role during gatherings, directing parking, arranging chairs, keeping track of children near roads or open areas. At events involving water or outdoor spaces, he tended to stand close to where activity was happening, rather than sitting apart. The celebration that afternoon was for his 8-year-old daughter. Relatives arrived with coolers, folding tables, and balloons. The chosen location along the estuary provided tree shade and a gently sloped shoreline where people commonly rinsed their feet or stood in the shallows to cool down. Weather records from that day show temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity. Under those conditions, even brief contact with water offered relief. Warning signs about crocodiles were posted near the access path, though several were weathered and partly covered by vegetation. The St. Lucia estuary supports a large Nile crocodile population. Despite posted notices, it was not unusual to see fishermen wading knee-deep or children standing near the water's edge during daylight. On that afternoon, several people who were not part of the birthday group were already in the shallows. The estuary's brackish water, steady fish supply, and gradual banks support large crocodiles. Adult male Nile crocodiles in this system commonly measure between 13 and 16 feet long and can weigh more than 1,000 pounds. They typically remain still or move slowly below the surface and strike when prey enters range. They are capable of short bursts of speed in water, but ambush at close distance is their usual hunting method. The water in that section was brown with suspended sediment, and underwater visibility was less than 1 foot. During the gathering, a relative mentioned crocodiles and gestured toward the brown, slow-moving water. Sibuso glanced in that direction, but pointed toward fishermen farther downstream, and 2 children already standing knee-deep near the reeds, suggesting the area was safe enough. Sandals were scattered along the muddy bank. Plastic chairs sat beneath low trees where adults talked and watched. A few children knelt at the edge, trailing their hands through the surface, splashing without concern. Sibuso stepped forward into the shallows. The first steps were cautious. Water covered his ankles, then his shins. The riverbed felt firm at first, packed sand layered with silt, but the texture shifted as he moved farther out. Estuary banks erode unevenly, and what appears gradual from shore can drop without warning. Within 3 or 4 steps, the water rose from below his knees to mid-thigh. Another step forward, and it climbed to his waist. The transition was sudden, where a shallow shelf gave way to a deeper channel carved by current. He paused there, adjusting his footing as sediment loosened under his weight. Small ripples spread outward in widening circles. He turned slightly toward shore and lifted one hand in a relaxed, reassuring gesture. Behind him, in water that showed only faint surface movement, a low ripple formed and then faded. In murky estuary water, such a disturbance can blend with normal surface patterns. A crocodile can approach with most of its body submerged, using slow tail strokes that create little splash. Sibuso remained facing the bank. His right hip and leg were angled toward deeper water. The waterline sat just below his belt. He shifted his weight slightly. The attack happened in a fraction of a second. A surge of water rose behind and to his right. The crocodile lunged upward from below, jaws open, driven by a strong tail thrust. Its snout broke the surface first, followed by its head and part of its upper body. The jaws clamped onto his upper thigh and hip, twisting his body sideways. His upper body pitched backward, while his legs were pulled laterally. The force knocked him off balance. Water sprayed outward as both bodies disappeared beyond the drop-off. The surface churned briefly as the crocodile pulled him under. Within seconds, the area where he had stood showed only widening rings. There was no prolonged struggle at the surface. Crocodile bite force has been measured in excess of 3,000 pounds per square inch in large individuals. The animal began a rotational movement commonly called a death roll. Such rolling is used to destabilize prey and can fracture bone or tear muscle, especially when the bite is anchored in the pelvis or upper leg. The water surface churned as sediment rose from the bottom. Large crocodiles typically attempt to drown prey quickly by holding it underwater. Loss of consciousness from forced submersion can occur within a few minutes, especially when combined with severe trauma and blood loss. Family members shouted from the shoreline. No one entered the water. Entering during an active crocodile attack carries extreme risk, and documented incidents show that additional victims can be injured when attempting rescue. The crocodile surfaced several yards from shore only briefly, with part of its head and upper back visible before it submerged again and moved toward deeper water along the channel edge. It did not thrash or remain at the surface. The initial strike and submersion occurred within seconds, while the total period during which surface disturbance and brief resurfacing were visible extended to roughly 1 to 2 minutes before the water fully settled. A lodge employee who witnessed the event from a nearby raised walkway immediately called emergency services, providing the exact location along the estuary bank. At the same time, another adult ran inland toward a ranger post to alert on-site personnel. The path between the shoreline and the nearest access road crossed uneven ground, covered in brush and loose sand, slowing movement. In that region, emergency response times commonly exceed 30 minutes due to distance, limited vehicle access, and the need for coordinated wildlife safety measures. First responders arrived approximately 35 minutes after the attack. By then, the water surface showed no disturbance. Search operations shifted to recovery, with trained teams scanning deeper channel sections where crocodiles typically secure prey. Sibuso's body was later located submerged near the channel edge. Medical examination documented extensive crush injuries to the pelvis and upper leg, consistent with a large crocodile bite and rotational force. Examination findings included damage to major vessels in the upper leg and significant soft tissue trauma. The report listed drowning as the primary cause of death, with traumatic injuries contributing to rapid incapacitation. The injury pattern was consistent with a single ambush and submersion. Park authorities reissued safety advisories reminding visitors that the estuary is an active crocodile habitat and that entering the water carries risk even during daylight and in the presence of others. It was August 22, 2014, and the late dry season had settled over Western Australia's Kimberley region, drawing visitors to the remote gorges and tidal waterways that made the area one of the country's most dramatic landscapes. Temperatures hovered near 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the still turquoise pools that formed along tidal creeks offered what appeared to be inviting relief from the oppressive heat. A remote stretch of Tidal Creek, approximately 12 miles from the nearest town, had become a popular stop among independent travelers exploring the region by four-wheel drive. The area was not a designated swimming location. No formal signage had been posted along this particular section, though general warnings about saltwater crocodile presence throughout the Kimberley were issued to tourists at regional visitor centers and published widely in travel advisories. Callum Bryce was a 31-year-old carpenter from Adelaide who had spent 6 weeks traveling through northern Australia with his girlfriend, Megan Alcott, 28, a veterinary nurse. The couple had been documenting their trip across social media and had developed a habit of seeking out secluded swimming spots featured in online travel forums. Several posts described this stretch of Tidal Creek as a hidden gem, though none mentioned crocodile risk. The couple arrived at the creek mid-morning and found conditions that appeared calm and safe. The water was clear in the shallows, the banks were sandy, and the creek stretched roughly 80 feet across with no visible current. Callum inflated a two-person pool floaty they had been carrying since Darwin, and the pair waded into the shallows before climbing on and drifting toward the center of the creek. Megan returned to shore after roughly 20 minutes, uncomfortable with how far they had drifted, but Callum remained on the floaty, lying on his back with his arms and legs trailing in the water as he drifted slowly downstream. Over the next half hour, Callum floated approximately 200 yards from where he had launched. The creek widened and deepened as it curved toward a section bordered by dense mangroves. The subtle current that had seemed harmless in the shallows became more pronounced as the channel deepened. Without paddling or anchoring himself, Callum's inflatable drifted steadily along the outside bend, where erosion had carved a deeper trough beneath the surface. Mangrove roots extended into the water like submerged fingers, creating shaded pockets where larger predators frequently positioned themselves to intercept prey carried by tide or current. The water shifted from clear to murky brown as tidal influence mixed sediment through the channel. Callum showed no sign of concern, drifting lazily with his limbs dragging through water that had become completely opaque beneath him. Saltwater crocodiles' dark coloring renders them virtually invisible in murky or tannin-stained water, and they are capable of tracking surface disturbances from considerable distance. Limbs trailing from the surface create vibrations and silhouettes consistent with typical prey. A saltwater crocodile can strike from directly below with enough force to pull a full-grown adult off any surface-level platform, dragging them beneath the water almost instantly. A large male crocodile had been resting in deeper water, where the creek bent toward the mangroves, roughly 15 feet from Callum's drifting path. The animal had likely detected the floaty's movement and the rhythmic disturbance of Callum's trailing limbs well before it reached striking range. The attack came from below. The crocodile surged upward and clamped its jaws around Callum's right leg just above the knee, the bite force crushing bone and tearing through muscle instantly. The floaty flipped violently as the animal's weight dragged Callum sideways into the water. He surfaced briefly, thrashing, before the crocodile pulled him under with a powerful twist of its body. Megan, watching from the bank roughly 200 yards upstream, saw the floaty overturn and heard a single short scream before the water erupted in violent churning. The murky brown surface made it impossible to see anything beneath. Within seconds, The disturbance moved toward the mangrove edge and the water grew still. Megan ran to their vehicle and drove to the nearest roadhouse, where staff contacted emergency services. Police and wildlife rangers arrived approximately 2 hours later. Search operations began immediately, focusing on the mangrove-lined section of the creek where the attack had occurred. Callum's remains were recovered the following day in deep water near the mangrove bend. Investigators concluded that Callum had entered known crocodile habitat without taking precautions, drifting into increasingly dangerous water on an unsecured inflatable with his limbs submerged. The area was subsequently marked with permanent crocodile warning signage, and regional authorities issued renewed advisories, urging travelers to avoid entering any waterway in the Kimberley, regardless of appearance. It was April 3, 2017, in the remote Sundarbans region of Bangladesh, where the world's largest mangrove forest creates a labyrinth of tidal waterways. This UNESCO World Heritage Site spans the delta where the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers meet the Bay of Bengal, forming a unique ecosystem. The Sundarbans are home to Bengal tigers, spotted deer, and saltwater crocodiles. Milo Scott, a 34-year-old construction engineer from Dhaka, had traveled to his wife's ancestral village deep within the Sundarbans during Bengali New Year celebrations. As a practical professional specializing in infrastructure development, Milo volunteered to inspect the village's aging wooden bridge, connecting the community to the mainland. The bridge, constructed over 40 years ago, had become increasingly unstable due to decades of monsoon flooding and saltwater corrosion. Local villagers warned Milo about dangers lurking in the tidal creek below, speaking about massive crocodiles that had claimed several lives. However, Milo dismissed these concerns as rural superstition, confident that his engineering expertise would protect him. His wife's elderly uncle had requested the bridge inspection, as the village council needed professional assessment to secure government funding for repairs. The bridge spanned a narrow tidal creek connected to the main river system, creating perfect habitat for saltwater crocodiles during seasonal migrations. Milo's visit coincided with peak breeding season, when these apex predators become increasingly territorial and aggressive while seeking suitable nesting sites. The saltwater crocodile represents the largest living reptile on Earth. Large adult males commonly reach lengths of 14 to 17 feet and can weigh 1,000 pounds, making them formidable apex predators capable of killing water buffalo. These prehistoric survivors possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, delivering bone-crushing pressure through jaws lined with dozens of conical teeth. Saltwater crocodiles are opportunistic hunters that remain motionless for hours while waiting for prey to approach the water's edge. Their incredible stealth allows them to approach victims undetected, using only their eyes and nostrils above the waterline while their massive bodies remain hidden beneath the murky surface. During breeding season, males become extremely territorial and will attack anything entering their domain. That morning, Milo walked across the deteriorating wooden bridge, carrying heavy surveying equipment. The bridge's support beams had been weakened by decades of saltwater exposure and termite damage. As Milo reached the center span to take measurements, several rotted planks gave way under the combined weight of his body and equipment. The sudden structural failure plunged Milo into the murky tidal creek below, where heavy surveying gear immediately dragged him underwater. The splash alerted a 13-foot saltwater crocodile that had been resting motionless in the creek, perfectly camouflaged among floating debris and mangrove roots. Milo surfaced gasping and disoriented, struggling to stay afloat while weighed down by waterlogged equipment. The crocodile approached rapidly through the water, propelled by its powerful tail toward the disturbance. The massive predator struck without warning, its enormous jaws clamping down on Milo's left arm near the shoulder with devastating force. The initial bite crushed Milo's shoulder blade and fractured his upper arm bone, while the crocodile's conical teeth tore through muscle and severed major blood vessels. The immense pressure destabilized his upper body as blood loss and shock progressively weakened him over several minutes. The crocodile then initiated its signature death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause maximum tissue damage. As the massive reptile rotated its body, Milo's arm was torn violently backward, rupturing major arteries and blood loss. The rolling motion caused massive trauma, keeping him pinned underwater and making escape nearly impossible. Milo's family members watched helplessly from the collapsed bridge as he disappeared beneath the surface during the death roll. The crocodile's powerful spinning motion had twisted his spine beyond repair, while simultaneously drowning him in the muddy creek water. The combination of massive blood loss and prolonged submersion ensured death occurred rapidly. The crocodile dragged Milo's body approximately 50 meters downstream before disappearing into the deeper channels of the mangrove system. His surveying equipment floated to the surface, providing the only evidence of the tragic accident. Local authorities launched an extensive search operation involving multiple boats and experienced crocodile hunters, but the complex network of tidal channels made recovery efforts extremely challenging. Officials started an investigation focusing on the lack of safety barriers around known crocodile habitats. Milo's death sent shockwaves through the engineering community in Dhaka and highlighted the ongoing conflict between rural development needs and wildlife conservation. His family established a memorial fund to improve bridge safety in remote villages. It was September 8, 2015, when the Mary River in Australia's Northern Territory became the site of a devastating crocodile attack that would claim the life of a promising young athlete. The Mary River system, renowned for having one of the world's highest concentrations of saltwater crocodiles, winds through tropical wetlands where multiple warning signs alert visitors to the extreme danger of entering the water. During the dry season, reduced flow concentrates water into deeper pools, giving the river a deceptively calm surface, despite its persistent turbidity and tidal influence. The surrounding landscape creates a picturesque setting that masks the presence of apex predators lurking beneath the surface. Thea Abbott, a 19-year-old university student studying sports science, had arrived at the Mary River with 3 friends for a spring break camping trip. Abbott worked part-time as a lifeguard and was known for her competitive swimming abilities and fearless attitude in the water. Her athletic confidence had earned her respect among her peers. The group had set up camp near a popular fishing spot, seeking a secluded location away from crowded tourist areas. Abbott dismissed her friends' warnings as overly cautious, believing the likelihood of an actual encounter was low during daylight hours. Her competitive nature and desire to prove her swimming prowess had driven her to suggest crossing the river to reach a sandy point on the opposite bank. Multiple crocodile warning signs were posted throughout the area, but Abbott dismissed them as overly cautious. She trusted her experience in the water and believed the risk had been exaggerated. Her friends voiced concern, yet she brushed it aside and moved forward anyway. The saltwater crocodile represents the pinnacle of aquatic predator evolution, having perfected its hunting techniques over millions of years. Large adult males can exceed 5 meters in length and weigh several hundred kilograms, making them among the largest living reptiles on Earth. Their bite force ranks among the strongest ever measured in an animal, capable of crushing bone with devastating efficiency. As daylight fades toward dusk, crocodiles become increasingly active as they transition into peak hunting behavior. Their ability to remain completely submerged for extended periods allows them to approach prey undetected. At 4:15 p.m., Abbott entered the Mary River from a sandy launch point, beginning her swim across the 80-meter-wide channel toward the opposite bank. The water appeared calm and inviting, with no visible signs of danger. Abbott had completed approximately 40 meters when disaster struck. A 4.5-meter saltwater crocodile had been monitoring the area from beneath the surface, likely attracted by the unusual disturbance in its territory. The massive predator approached from below, using the river's depth and murky water to remain completely hidden until the moment of attack. The crocodile struck with explosive force, its massive jaws clamping around Abbott's right leg just above the knee. The crushing bite likely fractured her femur and caused catastrophic vascular damage, resulting in rapid blood loss. The impact drove Abbott underwater before she could call for help. The crocodile clamped onto her leg and surged backward, using its body weight and tail to pull her beneath the surface. Once submerged and firmly anchored, it began a controlled death roll, rotating repeatedly while maintaining its grip. The powerful twisting motion inflicted severe tissue damage and rapidly disabled her ability to resist. The rotational force subjected her body to extreme stress, resulting in extensive traumatic injuries consistent with a sustained death roll. Maintaining control of its prey, the crocodile dragged Abbott underwater as it continued the attack. The force of the attack caused severe chest trauma, further compromising her ability to breathe. The combination of blood loss, trauma, and forced submersion would have led to rapid loss of consciousness. The predator dragged Abbott's body to the river bottom, holding her submerged for several minutes until all movement ceased. Her friends on the distant shore were unable to mount any rescue attempt due to the attack's speed and distance. Search and rescue teams recovered Abbott's body the following morning after an extensive overnight operation. The investigation concluded that she had ignored multiple warning signs and entered the water during peak crocodile activity hours. Her death prompted renewed calls for stricter enforcement of swimming prohibitions. Her death intensified public discussion around water safety education and the dangers of entering crocodile-inhabited waterways. The Northern Territory government increased signage and penalties for violations. Abbott's death was part of a broader pattern of fatal crocodile encounters in Australia's north, a danger reinforced by further deaths the following year. It was February 5, 2018, and the wet season had turned the coastal waterways of northern Queensland into a network of swollen creeks and flooded flats. Seasonal rains had pushed saltwater crocodiles into areas where they were more visible than usual, basking on muddy banks and resting along boat ramps where warmer ground met the waterline. A public boat ramp located approximately 20 miles north of Cairns had become a popular spot for locals and tourists to observe crocodiles from a safe distance. A large male had been frequenting the ramp for several weeks, hauling out onto the concrete slope during low tide to bask in the afternoon heat. Wildlife authorities had posted warning signs prohibiting feeding or approaching crocodiles, but the animal's predictable appearances had drawn a steady stream of onlookers who photographed it from the parking area above. Rhett Calloway was a 22-year-old backpacker from Manchester who had been traveling through Queensland for 5 weeks. He worked casual hospitality jobs between destinations and spent most of his free time consuming wildlife content online. In particular, Rhett had become fascinated by viral videos showing handlers in controlled environments, touching and even stroking crocodiles that appeared completely docile. Several videos featured individuals approaching wild crocodiles on riverbanks and retreating unharmed, reinforcing the impression that a calm, slow approach could be safe. Rhett had visited the boat ramp twice in the previous week, each time watching the crocodile bask motionless for hours. The animal never reacted to the people watching from the parking area, and Rhett had interpreted this stillness as passivity. Over time, repeated human presence at the ramp had conditioned observers more than the crocodile itself. The reptile's daily basking created an illusion of routine, as though its behavior followed a predictable schedule. Wildlife officers later noted that such predictability often increases risk, as visitors begin mistaking tolerance of distance for tolerance of proximity. He told his hostile roommate that the crocodile was clearly habituated to humans and that the warning signs were excessive. His roommate cautioned him against doing anything reckless, but Rhett dismissed the concern. On this afternoon, Rhett returned alone at approximately 2:30 p.m. The crocodile was resting in its usual position on the lower section of the ramp, roughly 40 feet from the waterline. Its massive body lay motionless, eyes partially closed, jaws slightly open in the typical thermoregulatory posture. 3 other visitors were observing from the parking area above. Rhett moved past them and descended the ramp slowly, his phone held out to record. He approached in a low crouch, stopping roughly 8 feet from the animal. The crocodile did not move. Rhett crouched lower and extended his left hand, reaching toward the animal's tail. Saltwater crocodiles are ambush predators whose stillness reflects energy conservation, not docility. Pressure receptors along their jaws and body detect vibrations and movement at close range, even while basking, and a resting crocodile can transition to full attack speed in a fraction of a second, with no telegraphing movement beforehand. Mature males in northern Queensland commonly exceed 14 feet in length and weigh over 1,100 pounds. Videos depicting humans safely touching crocodiles typically involve captive animals in controlled settings, while failed attempts are rarely recorded or uploaded. The crocodile struck the instant Rhett's hand made contact. The animal spun laterally with explosive speed, its massive head whipping around in a movement far faster than its size suggested possible. The jaws clamped around Rhett's left forearm and wrist, interlocking teeth driving through muscle and shattering bone below the elbow. The force wrenched him forward onto the concrete as the crocodile began dragging him down the ramp toward the water. Rhett screamed and braced his feet against the ramp's surface, but the crocodile's power was overwhelming. The animal pulled him across the wet concrete in a series of violent jerks, each tug closing the distance to the waterline. Witnesses above shouted, and one threw a cooler box toward the animal, but the crocodile did not release. Within seconds, it had dragged Rhett into the shallows. Once in the water, the crocodile rolled. The rotational force tore Rhett's forearm free at the elbow, and the animal released momentarily before striking again, clamping onto his shoulder and upper chest. The crushing bite collapsed his ribcage and severed major blood vessels. Rhett was pulled beneath the surface within moments, the churning water staining dark before growing still. Witnesses called emergency services immediately. Police and wildlife officers arrived within 30 minutes, but the crocodile had moved into deeper water. Rhett's remains were recovered the following morning approximately 300 yards downstream. Investigators concluded that Rhett had deliberately approached and attempted to touch a wild saltwater crocodile in violation of clearly posted warnings. Witness accounts and Rhett's own phone, recovered from the ramp, confirmed the sequence of events. Wildlife authorities used the incident to launch a public awareness campaign warning against approaching crocodiles regardless of their apparent behavior, specifically addressing the influence of misleading online content.